Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Jim. I see John. How are you, John?
Good, Matt. Nice to see you.
So, Dawn, do we have Dawn? She was in the text chain, so let's give her a few minutes. I apologize. Marla, Delilah, we have you here?
Hi, Matt.
Yes.
Hey, how are you? Great. Hold on, she's texting back. She's on it. She's working on it right now.
Okay. Hello.
Oh, there she is. Hey, Dawn, how are you?
Sorry, that was a little clunky, but I'm here. We're all here.
We're all here. So we've got a lot of people here. Marla, were you able to communicate with people outside of the board about the applicants and all that, about the link?
I did. I sent an email to, well, everybody was copied on it. You can see who I sent it to.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure.
But I sent it to everyone I knew of that was interested in the meeting.
Okay.
That being said, I think that we may need to keep things open.
Yeah. And I'll address that once let's officially start the meeting though. Hello and welcome to the South Burlington Development Review Board meeting for May 5th.
This conference will now be recorded.
Now recorded. Welcome to the Development Review Board meeting for the City of South Burlington for May 5th, 2020. I'm Matt Coda. With us on the Development Review Board is Brian Sullivan, Don Philibert, Mark Baer, Alyssa Portman, Jim Langdon, and John Wilking. Also in attendance working for the city is Marla Keene, the Development Review Planner, and Delilah Hall, the Zoning Administrator. Anyone will have the opportunity to both listen and speak at this meeting, as is in any regular meeting where we're at City Hall. We ask for your patience as we make adjustments to the protocol. This is a fully electronic meeting consistent with Vermont law. Going to the items in the agenda, we will not be going over item number 1, directions, emergency evacuation procedures, because there's no one at City Hall right now. Item number 2, which is additions, deletions, or changes into the order of agenda items. I will move to announcements next before we open up for public comments for items not related to the agenda. So if there's any board members that also has any additions, deletions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will go straight to the announcements. And the reason why I want to do that is because this is clunky, this is different, but it deserves an explanation. And I apologize for those that have heard me say it before, but for those that are logged in and perhaps participating in their first Development Review Board meeting online, or their first online meeting of any kind, just to lay out the groundwork. First of all, I ask that you put your phones on mute if you're not talking. It's mostly because we hear the ambient sound, whether something's cooking or a TV is on in the background, or kids playing. That's all great. But if you hit mute, it makes it much easier to conduct this meeting. Our city staff, Delilah and Marla, are running the technology, and I'm sort of the traffic director. So they have the ability to flip the screen and to mute people if there's a disturbance of some sort. But we don't really want to do that. For those that have attended our meetings in City Hall, the process is the same. We will hear from the applicant. The DRB will discuss the application with the staff and ask questions of the applicant. And then we'll ask for public comment, which should be relevant to the specific agenda item that we're discussing. And that will occur after each application or sketch plan or whatever comes before us. Anyone who wishes to speak at that public comment period for that specific agenda item will get 3 minutes to speak, and then the friendly buzzer will sound, encouraging them to conclude their remarks. But that's certainly not the limit on public discourse. There's also a unique feature as part of GoToMeeting. It's a chat box where you can enter in information that you'd like to share or questions that you'd like to be raised. And of course, as we always do, we accept emails, and we all read the emails that come in, and those are public documents which then are posted to our website where we have our agendas. If anyone wants to send an email to the board about a specific application or anything in general, you can send it to Marla at mkeene, M-K-E-E-N-E @sburl.com, or to me, mcota, M-C-O-T-A @sburl.com. In addition, that's it for right now. So then we'll go back to agenda item number 3, which is comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. So what I'll do here is I'll ask people to digitally raise their hand, which they can do one of 2 ways. One is when I ask you just to say your first name and your last name, and then I'll call on you in turn, or to, in the chat room, write that you would like to speak. I do this so to make sure that no one speaks on top of each other and everyone gets the full 3 minutes. So I would ask if there's anyone that would like to speak in the public on something that's not related to the agenda, please state your name. Okay, I'm going to check the chat right now. Okay, and I don't see anything there. So I don't hear anyone say that they would like to comment, and I don't see anything in the chat. But that, of course, doesn't limit your ability to submit a public comment in writing through the email function, or to write a letter and put a stamp on it, because we still do that as well. Okay, so moving on to item number 5, which is continued site plan application SB 20-017 of Booska Commercial LLC to amend a previously continued plan for 25,560 square feet, 31-foot high warehouse. The amendment consists of relocating the previously approved shared driveway at 4030 Meadowland Drive. Who is here for the applicant?
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Hi, Dave. Anyone else with you, Dave?
Tim McKenzie from South Burlington.
Hi, Tim. Dave and Tim, would it be all right, and the board, if we simultaneously opened 5 and 6, went in order, but we kept them open?
That's acceptable.
Okay. So I'd also open continued site plan application SB 2016 of SBRC Properties LLC to amend a previously approved plan for a shared driveway. The amendment consists of relocating the driveway at 362 Meadowland Drive, and I do so because there is some interaction, obviously, between these 2 distinct applications. I will be talking.
David Shank is here as well. Sorry.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Sorry to cut you off. And I apologize to everyone for talking so much, but remember that some people may not have the ability to see me or the projects ahead. They're just listening in. Remember, you can just have a landline phone and participate in this public hearing. So if I'm speaking more than I would at City Hall, the reason is because there may be some people that are listening to me and rather than seeing me, and that's perfectly fine. But before we start item 5 and 6, I'd like to say for anyone that's listening and watching back home that this is a site plan. What is a site plan? A site plan is a land development project that does not require subdivision or does not qualify as a planned unit development or eligible to be reviewed as site plans. In this hearing, the applicant will describe the project, and then the applicant and the board will step through the staff comments, thereby considering the proposal's conformance with the applicable land development standards. The board may choose to continue the meeting at a later date if there are questions that remain to be examined. The future date will be announced prior to concluding the item for the evening. At the end of this hearing, the board will vote on whether to close the hearing And once closed, the issue will issue a decision on the site plan. The decision will be mailed to the applicant and to those who have identified themselves as interested persons. If no appeal of the board's decision is made within 30 days, the decision is final, and the applicant can proceed with the application for a zoning permit to implement the project. These are continued site plan applications, so the three gentlemen who identified themselves with this application have been sworn in. So let's start with item number 5 with SB 2017, a Booska Commercial, and let's talk about what we've got here and why we're continuing this and how we're going to do the evening here. Would we like to start with Tim or Dave? Talk about what we have here before us?
Very good. Last time we appeared before the board, we were reviewing the issues associated with the proposed improvements on Lot 1G, which is the newly created subdivided lot, and also more specifically the access to that particular lot that is proposed to come across Lot 1. And to frame the discussion last time, the plan had basically shown pretty much a glorified driveway to Lot 1G, Booska Movers. But in this particular case, we had decided or agreed upon to modify the road design to actually make it look more like a public road with a curb cut off of it, in support of perhaps this particular roadway component extending in a looped nature out to the existing Randall Street to the north. So we went back to the office, we revised the design of that proposed road servicing Lot 1G, Booska Movers, and submitted that for staff review. And we do have 4 comments with regard to the site plan component. And then we also have additional comments concerning the proposed roadway. So to keep things simple, we can start on site and then we can move out to the roadway. Do you want me to read the comments? Matt, you may have been muted there.
Okay, why don't we start out with staff comment number 1. Staff recommends the board review the revised plans, including the truck turning movement plan, discuss with the applicant the proposed circulation patterns, and determine if they consider these criteria met. So maybe we can look at the one of these images of the truck turning movements.
So Marla, there's sheet 2.5, which provides the truck turning overlays on top of the proposed conditions.
Dave, you greatly overestimate my ability to multitask. Delilah runs the presenter and I take the notes.
Yes, Delilah, show us the truck turning movements. Oh, that's the one. That's the one I was looking at. Yeah. So what has changed since we last saw this?
So in this particular case, what has changed is that the access coming off of Meadowland Drive, that's the existing roadway in the top right-hand side of this particular drawing, and the curb cut, thank you, Delilah, or was that Marla? There we go. That represents the proposed curb cut, and the previous discussions we had was that the state asked us to cross the wetland at the narrowest point. That's what this does, but more specifically, once we get across the wetland and head in the southerly direction, which is down on this particular plan, we created a road section and a modification in the sidewalk to more closely represent a typical public street. So if you recall the discussion where when we crossed the wetlands, we needed to basically keep the sidewalk tucked up to the roadway. That's a curbed section within the wetland and the 50-foot buffer. But as we move south out of there, you can see that the sidewalk moves away from the edge of the roadway surface, creating a green space, and ultimately, it shows that everything continuing down in the southerly direction in support of perhaps a further extension in the future. But in this particular case, it provides at least a hammerhead turnaround if somebody comes down the wrong way and doesn't have to drive into the site. We also have modified the sidewalk components to basically do a better job of getting people from this particular, we'll call it Randall Street South, only because further to the north and west of Lot 1 is the existing Randall Street. So we'll call this Randall Street South for just nomenclature purposes. And we've basically modified this to reflect the exact typical section that was used for Randall Street North. And that basically is the context of the changes that were made to the plan to provide the opportunity for the applicant to continue to have discussions with the city as to whether or not this particular first section of roadway may be eligible to be taken over as a public street in the future. So there's a little bit of carryover between Lot 1G, which is really what this additional comment number 1 is, and how the trucks basically come into the site, move around through there, and come back out the second access that we discussed at during the last meeting.
And we're going to get to public versus private and the width of the roadway as we get to item number 6. But, is there anything else with the truck turning movement plans that you'd like to mention, Dave, or is there anything the board would like to discuss as we look at the flow of traffic on Randall Street just to service this building?
Delilah, if you can just move the drawing up a little bit on the screen so everybody can see at least the bottom half of the site. You can see how the truck movements basically come into the site, either back into loading areas or into parking spaces, or continue back out from those particular spots to onto the east side or right side of the site, and then continue on out into Meadowland Drive. The truck movements actually aren't shown on that last new section of roadway, but ultimately being straight, it comes out, and then there will be a discussion in regards to the radii that's used out at the intersection with Meadowland Drive as you just go off of this particular sheet for those who can see this particular plan.
And I'll go back to Dave, to the stormwater stuff, but skipping ahead to the staff comment number 3, which talks about truck movement should only be to the left and recommends the board require the applicant to minimize turn radius on both sides to no more than 20 feet maximum indicated in figure 15.1D for streets. Can you identify, Delilah, maybe with a pointer, where we're talking about truck movements being only to the left?
There you go.
All attendees can draw, so if you want to grab it, Marla.
Sure. So if the circulation is sort of this direction,
Right.
and Meadowland Drive is a dead end, trucks only leave this way.
We have no problem with accepting condition number 3 or comment number 3 as a condition of approval.
Okay.
So what it does is basically narrows up the throat of that particular proposed curb cut out of Meadowland Drive. The radii becomes shorter. And in this particular case, Marla's point is well taken that 99.9% of the truck movement will be to the left. There may be some client in the future on the right-hand side of this particular driveway, but again, most of them will be going to the left. So we again have no issue with tightening up that driveway to basically facilitate left turn only.
Okay. And number 4, as long as we're still talking about the driveway, staff recommends the board require the applicant to place stop signs on both sides of the driveway and extend the painted stop bar across the entire width. David, does the applicant have an issue with this?
That's acceptable as a condition of approval.
Okay, that's good to hear. Let's go back to stormwater. You've read I'll just go over them briefly for those that don't have the documents in front of them or that are listening. The stormwater section city has reviewed Booska Commercial at 410 Meadowland Drive in the plan prepared by civil engineering and offered the following 4 comments. 1, that the proposed project is located in the Potash Brook watershed. 2, that type 2 stone should be, that 12-inch type 2 stone should only be shown around the risers on the inlet side of each gravel wetland cell, providing this around the outlet risers of the cells potentially allows for short circuiting through the system. Item number 3, sheet C30C should be updated to include a silt fence and demarcation fencing to protect the wetland bounded by the stormwater features and access driveway. And number 4, the DRB should include a condition requiring the applicant to regularly maintain all stormwater treatment and conveyance infrastructure staff recommends that we include these comments from the city stormwater section as conditions of approval. Is the applicant find that acceptable?
That is acceptable.
Okay, good. Is there anything else that Dave or Tim or David would like to add before I ask the board if they have any other comments? No? Anyone on the DRB have comments about the circulation or the turn left or anything else before we go on to 6, which is related to this? Okay, so while we've got you all here, we already opened it, SP 2016-430 Meadowland Drive, and we'll talk more in depth about the roadway, public and private roadway. But first, the comment from the staff. The previous hearing, the board briefly discussed with the applicant the potential for a condition to prohibit additional curb cuts off Meadowland Drive accessing Lot 1. Staff recommends the board conclude this discussion. To bring us back up to date, maybe we could see go back to a map, and Dave or Tim, you could point out where these curb cuts would be.
Oh, I'm bringing it up. Hold on a second.
Yep.
So Delilah, if you can find C 2.0.
And I'm going to jump in here. This is Marla. So just to further elaborate on this, this is a comment that was discussed at the previous hearing about the potential for limiting. So on the overall plan, you can kind of see how big Lot 1 is, and Lot 1 has a curb cut off Meadowland up at the existing Randall Street, and then there's this new proposed curb cut, and that one. And at the last hearing, the applicant said, well, we'd rather that not be a condition because who knows what'll change in the future. Obviously, the wetlands program has said this is the only place you're going to be allowed to put in a curb cut. I just want to make sure the board didn't have any further questions for the applicant before making their determination on whether there should be a condition for, prohibiting additional curb cuts off of Meadowland Drive.
So Marla, if I understand how this works, if there's a condition that says no more curb cuts on Meadowland Drive, the only access to Lot 1 is through that road, this new road here, which may be public or maybe private, depending on what happens.
Yeah,
here.
Delilah, can you pan so you can see both Randall Street and the new one? Same sheet, just pan over a little bit. Even more. There you go. So
That is it. Go ahead, Marla. I'm sorry.
Dave, do you know off the top of your head how far those two are apart?
I'm going to say that's probably 600 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, probably closer to 800 feet.
Yeah.
So anyways, cutting to the chase here, the applicant is willing to accept a condition of approval that there would be no more curb cuts servicing Lot 1 other than what is shown on this plan. So we all see the writing on the wall with regard to, both the city's desires as well as the state's desires with regard to this area of Meadowland Business Park.
Thank you, David. Anyone on the board, do you have any issues with limiting the curb cuts to this property?
No, I don't, Matt. Mark here.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
No issue, Matt. It's John.
Okay.
I'm fine. This is Dawn.
Thanks, Don. Okay, I think we're good there. Moving on to item 2, the same comments from the stormwater section chief apply to this application. And I would assume that Dave, you're fine with those comments, conditions of approval in this application.
That is correct. This is acceptable as a condition of approval.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to page 3 of SB 2016, item number 3. This is private versus public, which is pretty much the rest of this question and how we're going to get to a decision on this new road and whether it's private it's a private road or it's a public road or it's a private road to be a public road. And if I can paraphrase what is 2 healthy pages of questions, so I understand it, and please, Marlon or Dave, correct me where I'm wrong. If we are to say that this is a private road now, but could be made public should Lot 1 be developed, it's got to be engineered to the standards of a public road.
That's correct.
That's correct. So is it right now to the standards of a public road? Or does something have to change in order to meet those standards?
We can, yeah, so I guess comments 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all kind of about the same thing. Right now, the applicant's cross-section shows 26 feet. And the plan looks like the plan shows 26 feet and the cross-section looks like it shows 27 feet. Dave Marshall and I had a little bit of correspondence back and forth today. His intention is to make it be the same as the constructed Randall Street cross-section, which he believes is, Dave, 27 and a half, is that what you said?
If I can jump in, it is 26 feet of paved surface with another 3.5 feet of shoulder. So 29.5 feet total width. If I can be rude and jump in, it does not technically meet the 32-foot width standard for commercial roadways. However, when we developed Randall Street North, or the existing Randall Street, with Justin Rabideau, he recognized that as we move away from the center of the city back out into these more open areas, and of course this is the industrial open space district, that he was comfortable with a typical section that didn't have curbing, that had shallow ditches on either side. And we worked with Public Works Department to develop the typical section used for the existing Randall Street. What we have done is basically take that exact same typical section and apply it to this particular proposed private roadway, hopefully someday perhaps to become public, on this section adjacent to Lot 1G, serving the Booska movers right now. And
so let me give that statement some context in the LDRs, Dave. So table 15.1 of the LDR says a local road has a minimum pavement width of, sorry, I'm off screen, I'm like reading the LDRs, minimum pavement width of 28 feet. And for industrial or commercial uses shall be 32 feet unless determined otherwise by the DRB pursuant to section 1512D4, which basically gives the board discretion in determining street widths. So if the road is proposed to be 28 feet wide, it meets. Sounds like it's proposed to be 26 feet wide. Is that right, Dave?
no, actually, the road width is 29.5 feet. It just happens that the asphalt.
Using the word road, and the LDR is actually references pavement width. So the pavement width is proposed to be 26 feet.
Actually, for my graduate work, pavement is any improvement that will carry a vehicle. So right now, the pavement width is 29.5 feet. If you want to talk about asphalt on the surface, it is 26 feet.
Okay, I mean, if that's something that you feel is a gray area, then that can be open to discussion.
Well, I guess in this particular case, I'm sorry, Matt, I'm just going to get this off my chest. All we're trying to do is match the same section that's already been approved by both Public Works and the Development Review Board. That's all. So there was a decision made back 4 years ago when the Randall Street typical section was approved by the city, and all we're trying to do is just carry that same section. We're not trying to do anything devious. We're just basically, we thought it would be the simplest thing to do, was basically just carry a previously approved typical section that was recent. It wasn't 20 years ago. It was basically the most recent thinking of the existing administration of Public Works and the Development Review Board at that time.
Well, before we get into details on can we make, I just would do a temperature check of the board. It's my inclination, but that this be private as long as it serves one company, Booska, but it become public if another development happens and if that's roads connected. Is that the general feeling before we get into what the correct width of the street should be? Is that the general feeling of the board, so we can make sure we're directing the conversation the right way? Does the rest of the board feel that way?
Mark
In
here,
theory,
Matt.
That makes sense.
This is Alyssa.
Go ahead, Lissa.
I was just going to say I agree.
Okay.
It's John.
Okay.
Is Randall Street North currently public or not?
No,
It is
It
not.
is still, right.
Justin has told me that that the city will accept it. Well, it's not his decision to make, but his recommendation is that the city will accept it when one or two things happen. Either we get another tenant up there or another business, and we develop a second lot, or we complete the loop. Those were the two conditions he set out as to when the city would accept it.
Yep.
Or
When he
would
pursue
recommend.
taking minutes at home, that was Tim McKenzie. Yeah. I think that makes sense. This is a private road right now. It will become public shall the road be connected and there be that land lot 1 be developed. The question is what's the proper width in order for us to accept, for the city to accept that as a public road should that occur.
Tim, I have a question. This is Dawn.
Go ahead.
When you say it become a loop, is that the highlighted area that Dave pointed out earlier? Would that be the loop?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think we have an agreement on what we want to happen. We just have a discrepancy on what the actual width is, whether we're measuring pavement or not. I'm not sure how to sort that through that right now. I'm not a
Matt, I
street
don't-
engineer. I have nothing
Matt,
to do
it's
with
John.
paving, so.
Matt, it's John. I don't think it really matters. I think the point is we're accepting 26 feet of asphalt. We did before, and we would be doing so again.
Matt, I agree with John.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Mark.
This is Jim. I do too.
Okay,
And Brian, I concur.
thank you, Brian.
I'm good with that.
Thank you, Don. Okay.
So
What
can
other,
I just
what else do we
summarize?
have here, Marla? Yeah, go ahead, Marla.
The board is going to say it needs to be built to public roadway. It needs to be built to the cross section that is provided in the plan set, but it will be private. Are we putting a specific thing or just until such time as the director of public works thinks makes the recommendation?
Well, we could either say that, or we could say until which time, say be specific and say which till it's time that the road is connected to Randall Street, or lot 1 is developed and that road becomes a shared road. I mean, I'm
I
not
don't
saying
think-
one.
It's John.
Right.
I don't think we have the right to accept public when a road becomes public. I think that's city council and public works.
But you do have the authority to say,
Build to public standards.
you do have the authority to say that. You also say you have the authority to allow a private road.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
But-
Yeah, but
Okay.
There's a
I see what
difference
you're saying,
between the
John.
construction and the behavior, I guess is what you call it.
Yeah, so we're requiring it to be built to public standards. And, but we are not.
Matt, excuse
Go
me.
ahead.
We're requiring it to be built to the same standard as Randall Street North. That is not necessary. Since we've got gray area here, let's not say to public standards. Let's say
Okay.
to a standard that we've accepted on Randall Street North.
I would agree with that.
So that it could be at a later date accepted as a public road. I don't know.
So Matt, Dave Marshall here. I think from a public policy standpoint, what the land development regulations are trying to do is make sure that whatever an applicant does is in the best interest of both parties. So if a roadway has the potential to service perhaps a public good, you want to make sure it's built to public standards ahead of time. In this particular case, this is more internal, but nonetheless, there's still some interest both from Public Works as well as the applicant that whatever gets built is going to be eligible to be taken over as a public street in the future. So all we were building off of was the previous approval of Public Works and the Development Review Board as far as a standard for Randall Street North, apply that to South, and then we'll see where things go. Who knows whether it'll be a loop road or whether it'll be two private dead end roads. But time will tell as the market dictates. And all we're trying to do is make sure that people understand that we just don't want to foreclose the opportunity for this to be a public street at this point in time.
Right. Okay. I think we've got it then. Anything else? Marla?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, and that really does it for, are there any other questions from the board or any other comments from the applicant before I turn it over to public comment for either application, either site plan application, SB 2017 or SB 2016? Okay, hearing none, I want to give the opportunity for the public to make a comment. There are really three ways to do it. One is to, when I ask for your name, say your name, and I will give everyone 3 minutes who would like to speak, either on the phone or through the GoToMeeting app. You can also use the chat box if you're using a tablet or a computer. And then, of course, you can also, if you don't want to do either, but would like to comment on these projects, you can also send us an email as well to mcota@sbro.com. or to Marla Keene at mkeene, MKEENE at sbro.com. So if there's anyone that has a comment about either of these two projects, please say your name. Okay, hearing nothing at this point, I'm checking the chat box. I don't see that anyone has asked to make a comment. If you missed the opportunity, if you forgot to take your computer off mute, don't worry. You can always offer a comment at a later date.
So Matt, I need to be a little technical
Specific.
here, unless you want to lead it. So because of the meeting login snafu and the board's expressed desire to be as transparent as possible, I would recommend the board keep this item open to the next meeting. In consideration for the applicant, though, I would proceed with preparing a draft decision. And if there's no additional public comment at the next meeting, the board can go ahead and issue that decision, just as though it wouldn't change the schedule unless there is additional public comment received between now and May 19th.
Right, and this is consistent with what we've done earlier in this new, I can't, it was the second or third time we did the GoToMeeting app. And I will admit, this may be disappointing to the applicant, who wish that we could close tonight and not continue. But this is expressly for the purpose of allowing those that were not able to log in tonight, or those that were not able, that had a technical challenge, to give them an extra 2 weeks or extra week to submit a comment. A draft decision will be done. We'll continue it, and the meeting at the next will be done purely for the purposes of closing it, unless we hear comments or there's other information that is presented to us that allows us not to do that. But that's so it is in this new world that we're living in. So I would make it, what is that date of the next meeting, Marla?
May 19th.
So I would move that we continue site plan application SB 20-017 and continued site plan application SB 2016 continue both to May 19th. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Dawn.
Okay, seconded by Dawn, and we'll call the roll just so we can, so this is clear. Matt Cota, aye. Brian Sullivan,
Aye.
Dawn Filbert,
Aye.
Mark Bear,
Aye.
Melissa Portman,
Aye.
Jim Langdon,
Aye.
John Wilking.
Aye.
Okay, and so both these items are continued for May 19th for the purpose of allowing anyone that was unable to make a public comment to submit it, at which point we'll be able to close this hearing on the 19th. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now moving on to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Now moving on to agenda item number 7. This is miscellaneous application 2001 of Burlington International Airport to establish an overall landscaping plan for an approved airport complex at 1200 Airport Drive. Who is here for the applicant?
Larry Lackey, Director of Engineering and Environmental Compliance.
Hey, Larry.
Hi.
Carolyn Orban, Wagner Hodson Landscape Architecture.
Hey,
And
Carolyn.
Keith Wagner, Wagner Hodson Landscape Architecture.
Hi, Keith.
Hi.
Anyone else out there?
Matt, this
Yeah.
is Dawn. Before
Dawn.
we have the applicant present, I have a question for probably Marla.
Okay,
Sure.
I just have one quick thing to say. Keith, I think we're getting some feedback from you. So if you could be really proactive about muting when you're not actively talking, that'd be really helpful.
Really? All right.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
it
That's
tells
good
me
advice
who's
for everyone, including me.
Okay, Dawn with your question. Go ahead.
Okay, so in the past several months, we have had a number of applications related to the airport. And I will admit, I don't know a lot about the organizational or ownership structure of the airport, but it just seems like we've had a lot of different applications. So could you please explain to me, are these unified under some previous master plan? Is there a way to tie these together, and why are there all these different applications? I understand the hotel is probably owned by someone else, but it seems like there's been a lot. There was the equipment shed, and then there was Heritage, which maybe isn't really part of the airport, and then now there's 2 different ones, and then there was we had some discussion about a bee garden on top of the garage. Can you explain to me how these are all related? Thank you.
Sort of. The airport is one big PUD. There is a requirement that all projects in the airport industrial district be a PUD, and up until very recently, all projects in the airport district also had to be a PUD. So that's how that situation happened in the first place. There are certain applications that would not otherwise trigger PUD review within the airport zoning district, and those can be reviewed as site plans. However, since this, I guess this one's just a miscellaneous because it's not an application for development, it's an application for a plan, is not a PUD. Everything else is a PUD. You'll see some that are relatively minor that are reviewed as site plans, and there's a couple more coming up. But it does seem to be that the airport has a lot of different folks responsible for a lot of different things, and I think that they've chosen to allow those applicants to represent themselves rather than doing one sort of big application. But I don't know if Larry, you want to talk a little bit more to that?
I can talk a little bit about it. Going back to last year, we did come forward, as you mentioned, with respect to the maintenance garage addition. And part of that was a condition because of our landscaping challenges with the airport to come forward with a master plan. And that's what for a landscaping master plan, that's why we're before you tonight. And we do have multiple applications before you and more to come. The 2 you've most recently heard from, which was your last meeting, it is a private developer being Heritage Aviation, who run their own operation and just lease the property from us. That, along with tonight, you'll be hearing from Beta Technologies, the electric aircraft company, and they are a private company that are leasing property from us too. So they're their own entity, and we just lease them the footprint. And I would gladly go through all the ones from last year to now, and a couple more that we're going to have coming over the next month or two, if you'd like. But most of them are the airport driven, but Beta and Heritage are two people that lease and are private companies.
But Don's question, I think, is a great one because it segues into this miscellaneous application, which and Mark and John, who preceded me on the board, can speak to this. But certainly at my time, as you know, land development regulations in South Burlington require a percentage of the project, of any new project, to spend on landscaping. And because it's such a large PUD, it's the whole airport, it made sense, and we have done incrementally, it made sense not to put the entire landscaping project on a tiny footprint if it makes more sense to spread it out across the airport. And then that necessitated a conversation or a discussion, which led to where we are tonight, where it said, well, we should really have a master plan or more comprehensive plan on landscaping. So every time a little project comes before us, it's not just, we're not just throwing trees at the end of the runway or whatever. We're doing it in a way that makes this area visually, aesthetically better. And that's why we've come to this point where we're looking at a landscaping plan for this and for the PUD that is the airport. Anyways.
Matt,
That's helpful for me.
Dawn,
Go ahead,
can I step in for a sec? Larry knows this better than I do, but there are much grander plans than what we're seeing here in the master plan for the airport, and it's simply too complex to step into in one meeting like this. But it might be worthwhile, even though it's not it's probably better for planning commission, but it might be worthwhile at some point for the airport to sit down with planning commission or DRB to walk through what's coming over the next 10 to 15 years. There's a lot there. I've been to meetings on it, and this is just one step.
Okay,
So
thanks, John.
we'll see a lot more.
From the airport's perspective, we, every 5 or 10 years, we go through a new master plan process where we're required to by the FAA. We're currently in that process, and we're going through multiple public meetings, which we've had, which Paul Connor typically from the Planning and Zoning Department take part in. But we would gladly come in and talk about where we're at from the old master plan and what we're looking forward for the next 10 or so years in the new master plan. But there's been multiple public meetings. There's going to be still multiple more on our overall master plan. And we did talk this landscaping master plan in our overall FAA master plan to pull them together.
Okay, so Larry or anyone on your team, maybe we best proceed with this. If you just give us a brief summary overview, and then we'll go through some of the staff comments maybe more in depth. But if you could do with a 30,000 foot overview of, no pun intended, of what you're trying to do here.
All right, well, I'll do a little introduction, and then I'll turn it over to Carolyn, who's done most of the work with Keith. Basically, we come before you for multiple applications, as we just spoke about. Landscaping is a challenge due to safety issues with respect to the airport, both from, like you mentioned, Matt, trees at the end of a runway or attracted to wildlife within the airfield fencing. So we have to be very careful, and we have requirements we have to live by, and to include full-time USDA coverage for wildlife. When we came before you for our maintenance garage addition, which we have not moved forward with because we're looking at a bigger project or a bigger type one down the road, we were asked or provided a condition that required us to submit a master plan for landscaping. Just that the condition was to submit it. Please understand that the plan that we've developed, we worked with your staff, and it is a concept. It's a live document, and will be continually changing as time goes on, I'm sure, as the city progresses and the airport does. But this is our starting point And with that said, I'll turn it over to Carolyn and Keith to kind of do a 30,000 foot overview.
Okay. As Larry already explained, the Burlington Airport initially asked us to come up with a landscape master plan for the campus that would identify areas where we could place planting in an effort to satisfy the landscape budgets for future projects, future building projects. And as you know, and as was just discussed, in many instances, the specific building sites of many of these projects cannot always support all the planning that would be necessary to fulfill the landscape budget required by the city. So we began to study the entire campus and identify areas that could possibly sustain additional plant material. And we pretty quickly, in that exercise, realized that planting just for the sake of planting might not be the most effective way to distribute plant material and or spend money. Therefore, rather than try to place a large number of plantings in a haphazard fashion, we came up with a concept to beautify the campus in a more methodical, well thought out way. So we put this booklet together to act as sort of a roadmap for future improvements and in an overall conceptual plan. So the basic concept was to create an identity for the campus and a gateway onto the site. We decided that first a cohesive streetscape and enhanced entrances made the most sense. The streetscape we devised along Airport Drive consists of several different elements. Native street trees to fill in the areas where there's gaps between existing trees along the road, and also an ornamental fence that would run the length of Airport Drive where it's possible. And the other key to creating a sense of arrival and a gateway was to update and upgrade the landscape elements at the corner of Airport Drive and Williston Road, sort of the main entry onto the site. And this plan would consist of new signage, stone walls, probably native stone walls, native shrubs, grasses, and perennials, sculpture perhaps by local artists, and also the planting of river birch, which we look at as representing the look and feel of Vermont's native woodland. The other two key areas that we plan to address and highlight as gateways are the intersection of Airport Drive and Airport Road, the main entry into the airport, and also the exits and entrances moving north along Airport Drive. And some of those key areas will also have plantings of native varieties, and some of them will also have continue the look of the local stone walls. The final piece of this landscape master plan is a recreation path on the west side of Airport Drive, which will help to create a connectivity with the existing city sidewalks, recreation paths, and trails. We think it would probably run roughly from the intersection of Airport Road and Airport Drive north, eventually crossing Airport Parkway and onto city-owned land to meet up with the existing city trail that's located south of Kirby Road and north of Hanover Street. And we envision this as a paved blacktop path that would wind and meander through the existing trees and shrubs towards the west side of the property. And this path would hopefully enable folks in the neighborhood and beyond to have access to walking, running, biking. And we would also be including some informal sitting areas where we would locate some boulders arranged for sitting. We anticipate that this plan would support upcoming building projects for the next 10 years. And we would expect implementation to start with the streetscape first, moving, I guess, from the south end north. And then once that's completed, we imagine that the recreation path would be the next project. And that too would start from the south end and move north. We also envision that through the use of native building materials and native plant materials, particularly the use of these river birch at key entrances, we would be able to capture the character of the Vermont landscape and enhance the experience for those driving into and through the site and those walking and enjoying the recreation path. So that's basically what I have to say. Oh, Matt.
Keith,
oh,
you
there
want to
go.
add anything? Carolyn? Keith, you want to add anything before we step into the comments? Okay. Okay, I think it's important for those, because I know there's people listening on the phone, for just to just put the narrative behind it. The concept behind the proposed master plan is to use landscape funds in the most constructive and aesthetically pleasing manner, by giving the airport campus a sense of identity and creating a gateway into the airport property. This passage onto the airport site is intended to capture the flavor and essence of Vermont and its iconic landscape. Therefore, rather than try to place a multitude of plantings in haphazard fashion throughout the campus, its intent of this document is to, one, create a unified streetscape along the main corridor of the airport, namely along Airport Drive, and two, create a meandering recreation path through the existing trees on the west side of Airport Drive. So staff considers the overall landscaping plan should accomplish these four purposes: foster a sense of community through high-quality landscape design in the Chamberlain neighborhood, define the general location and flavor of landscaping and hardscape materials that will be installed over time, the use of minimum landscaping budget. Number three, establish a general plant palette, recognition and flexibility that science of plant selection or on-site specific needs and conditions may change time or sequencing of the proposed improvements. I think the staff, and I think certainly I can speak for myself, or have this comprehensive plan. So many projects come before us, and where the landscaping budget is going to go. But we do have let's see, we do have 2 pages of comments to go through, and we'll just go through them one by one if that's okay with the applicant and the rest of the board. Number one, the city's official in the 2016 Chamberlain Neighborhood Land Use and Transportation Plan from June 30th, 2016, identifies a realignment of Airport Drive and Airport Parkway, connecting the two as a priority project for the city. This project is not yet in development, and the conceptual alignment is subject to change, but staff recommends the overall landscaping plan be designed to allow this project to take place without requiring landscaping to be removed. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to show the conceptual alignment. So is in your mind, Carolyn, Keith, and is this been achieved? Can you show us, maybe Delilah can go to it on the map, where we can see the alignment?
Yeah, we can, if you want to pull up that map.
Is
the overall.
there a page in this report that you want me to go to that shows this, or?
The one that you've got the arrow on right now?
And you can draw on it if you go to the top and click drawing tools, Carolyn, if you need to point to something.
It's not on the top for me, if that matters for anyone. It's the thing on the side that looks like a carrot.
Oh, there we go. Well, I'm gonna have a hard time with this because I can barely see it. So green is so small, but it basically.
This is Larry. We did have
from the entrance over to White Street. It goes kind of like that. Wait. Yeah, and then did my line draw? Did it? All right, let's try that again. Doesn't seem to be working.
There you go.
Oops, that wasn't very good. Sorry. But what I would like to say is that we planned all the paths so that they would be on the west side of that horrible line.
Okay, so to cut to the chase, Carolyn, the answer to the staff question, which is we're not creating plantings that might be disturbed, shall that alignment of the road happen?
Well, that's
is
to
that
the best
correct?
of our knowledge, unless, that in itself is conceptual. But to the best of our ability, yes, we have kept
And that's what
planting
we want.
out of the way.
Right. And I think Delilah can erase the line if we need to, or or not. Number 2, the applicant is proposing a recreation path along the west side of the airport-owned land. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to describe the proposed recreation path features.
Okay,
This
so
will go on the
you
west
could-
side over here.
Yeah, if you want to go to page 21, Delilah.
Right. No.
No, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay, the second one down. Yeah, 20. Nope. One more.
27 here.
There we go. So, so we're envisioning, you know, a paved path, bituminous concrete, with boulders interspersed along it, and it would meander through the existing trees on site, and look similar to these sketches and these images.
Nice. Any questions from the board regarding the recreation path? Is this bikes or just walking?
Both.
Yeah, both.
Both. I like it. I like the shade
Yeah.
trees. If that's what we're gonna have. You know, this is just a conceptual drawing, but.
Carolyn, it's John Wilkin. Do you see a lot of planting having to be done in order to get that solution?
No.
I mean, it's very dense now.
Yeah, I mean, what's kind of being shown in the drawing are meandering through existing older trees and also trees that were recently planted, and shrubs as well, recently planted for the airport rental property, car rental property. So that's kind of what's in there. We haven't made any plans to add a lot more planting. We're planning for it to go through existing.
And Carolyn, does it loop around, or does it empty out? How does it empty out into the roadway, or does it come? Is it a circle? I mean, how does it?
It's quite lengthy. You have to kind of look through all the pages. It goes all the way through the site. In fact, if you go to the page we were on when I was drawing that horrible line, you can follow the line of the path. It weaves all the way from Airport Drive, the corner of Airport Drive and Airport Road, all the way north. It's a yellow line.
I see. Yeah.
And you can see where it's connecting in down at city property.
And then does it terminate at 15, at number 15 there, with the circle there?
Yes.
Okay. If there's nothing else on the rec path, the staff and the applicant may discuss whether, this is number 3, whether it made sense to include a sidewalk on the west side of Airport Drive. The ultimate conclusion was that existing sidewalks provided adequate access to buildings, and an off-road recreation path better addressed the recommendations of the Chamberlain neighborhood study. Staff recommends the board review the existing sidewalk to determine whether they agree with that conclusion. You know, I haven't been out there recently to check out the sidewalks, but if anyone else has, I certainly would concur with the Chamberlain neighborhood that a recreation path is desirable. So, but Alyssa or Jim or Brian, any other thoughts about that?
Hey, Delilah, could you go a little bit farther? A couple more sheets. So you can see here at this one, perfect, that there's only a sidewalk on the west side of Airport Drive. There's no sidewalk on the east side. And this is where staff met with Winger Hudson, and we talked about it a whole bunch, and we kind of concluded that there was no destination on the east side, so it didn't make sense to add a sidewalk. So the sidewalk that you're seeing on this sheet is existing. So if Delilah, you can go up one sheet, you can keep going just one. So we're now page right connects to page left of the previous page. There's still no sidewalk on the other side, but there's also still no destination. And then one more sheet up. And then there's the crosswalk right under the word continuation of.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I've walked that sidewalk and I've never felt the need to be on the other side. But
This is Alyssa. I walk that frequently with my dog, and I agree there's no need for a sidewalk on the other side.
okay. Item number 4, review the plans on a sheet-by-sheet basis. Sheet 1, the city has identified the bend in Dumont Avenue as potential location for stormwater BMP associated with the Centennial Brook Flow Restoration Plan. The city works with landowners to establish agreement to allow BMP to locate on the property. The city would be responsible for construction and maintenance of the BMP, but the city would not install any landscaping beyond the minimum necessary for BMP success. Staff recommends the board ask the airport to include in their plan a general concept of landscaping they may wish to include around the BMP and support the board's inclusion of this landscaping towards the overall landscaping plan. So this doesn't exist yet, correct, Marla? This is a potential stormwater mitigation measure at
There's a couple
Dumont
of
Avenue.
Right, so just going through on a sheet by sheet basis, I guess we could pull up the other plan, or we could just draw on this one because it's not really that complicated. If you wanted to just leave it up, I think it's fine.
Yeah, just leave it up and draw on it. You can.
You got it, Doyle, and just flip back to the PDF, should be fine.
Sorry, it's giving me issues.
There we go.
That better?
So I think it's sheet 4.
Yep, you just passed it.
One too many, I guess it was 3.
Okay, is that the sheet? No, 4, sorry.
So if you go to sheet 3, please. PDF page 3. There we go. All right, so this is where the little yellow dot is what we just waited for. I'm really sorry, I should have just gone a little yellow dot. So this is where the city has identified as a potential location for a full restoration plan stormwater practice. The city would be installing this practice with agreement with the landowner, being the airport. And there's an opportunity here for the airport to sort of beautify this feature. Not sure that this one makes a lot of sense, but there's another one farther down. So I don't know if Carolyn, you guys have given any thought on what your interest is in beautifying this one, and then we can talk about the other one when we get to the other one.
All I was going to actually say was that we're happy to include a concept for additional plantings on both of those BMPs. And we've noted it on the updated plans. Larry, did you want to say anything about it?
Right now, we believe they're going to be underground chambers. So, you know, it's not going to look much different than when they're finished from, you know, just the grass lawn, but we can, but we don't know that yet until we work that out with the city.
So in a sort of big picture way, this landscape master plan establishes a roadmap for the airport in putting in landscape going forward. So I think it'd be helpful for the board to provide some feedback on whether this is a location that would be appropriate for landscaping, keeping in mind that this may be sort of proximate to the future alignment of Airport Parkway. Is that right?
No, it
Was
won't.
this the one? This
It
is the
won't.
one we were talking about would be
This is at
blown
the
out by
end.
the, yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't. The other one won't be affected either, because it's further south.
So would the board consider plantings around a stormwater BMP as contributing to its landscape budget? I guess that is the question. And would they consider it around this BMP given its location?
It's John, and this is almost on the runway. My take is that this is an industrial location, and beautifying it has almost no purpose. I'd much rather see it aimed at the future street location.
Yeah, especially if we're thinking of, this isn't unlimited funds. This is a budget, and where we want to focus the landscaping budget. I'm not sure that BMP, if it comes about, is where we should focus too much time and resources. But
Yeah, it's almost, this is John, almost pearls to swine. You know, what's the point?
I understand Marlo's point, which is like if we're going to have more than one of these, you know, do we want to do it on a case-by-case basis based on where they are, or just say all of them have to have this?
Well, there's only a second one, and we'll get to it in a second.
Okay.
Marla, does the city come to you for permits for those?
I'm sorry?
Does the city come to you for approval of those BMPs?
It depends on the type. So if it requires movement of more than 20 cubic yards, either net gain or net loss, they'll get a DRV permit. But if it's less than that, they will not.
Right. Okay, well, these are rather small ones, and again, I think they're going to be looking towards chambers, underground chambers. So
it sounds like this one's not a good candidate, which is fine. We can just move on.
Okay. Just going in order, item number C, sheet 5, similar to sheet 1, cities identified northwest corner of the Airport Drive and Airport Road as location for a stormwater BMP in support of the Potash Brook Flow Restoration Plan. Staff recommends the board allow landscaping around the BMP as credit towards the minimum required landscaping budget and overall landscaping plan. So let's look, is this a different, you're gonna show us a different location here, Delilah and Marla?
Is it sheet 5 PDF page sheet 5 or this page marked 5?
The page with the 5 in the corner. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
So again, the yellow dot, this one is obviously more on the rec path.
Yeah. Yeah, you could see why you'd want something there. I'm not sure why.
We also have sort of a gateway component in that area, so it might all tie together.
Yeah, that would make sense, Carolyn. Okay, well, I think that's important to tie it all together. Item number D, sheet 7 and 9.
Do you want to go back
I think we
to,
skipped 4.
yeah. Oh, item B, sheets 2, 4, and 6.
Oh, B, 2, 4, and 6. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yep.
I was just getting the B piece. These sheets generally show infill landscaping, the recreation path, and some features around the entrances to the airport driveway. Staff recommends the board review the type of entrance features proposed and make a determination on what elements of the entrance features they would allow as credit towards the required landscaping budgets.
So maybe we want to pull up sheet or page 19, which shows those features. Okay, so the different components are the river birch, the ornamental fence that you see in the photograph, and then native shrubs. Actually, you know what? The next, I think it was the drawing before, which had the entry. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yep.
So anyway, the components are river birch, native stone walls, native shrubs, ornamental grasses, and perennials, perhaps sculpture, and updated signage. Keith, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, this is Keith Wagner. This was an important intersection for the identity of the campus, with traffic coming east-west on Williston Road, and certainly what's the other road coming right at it? Kennedy Drive. So we just thought it'd be interesting to pull down the identity of the airport down to this intersection, and using similar materials that we're using in other locations. Just creating sort of a welcoming point where people know that they're now arriving at the airport, sort of main intersection, if you will.
So Keith and Carolyn, that BTV sign in the lower left-hand corner drawing, that's on as I'm driving on Kennedy Drive, approaching Wilson Road, that's on the right-hand side?
Correct.
No?
It's where,
Okay.
if you look at the upper sketch, there was like a green sort of historic old airport pylon. These are just concepts, so don't look at them as what we're proposing. We're just saying that area could be really unique, and maybe it's a simple sign, but there's a sculpture that sort of reminiscent of or draws to mind aviation, done by a local artist. But that this intersection is important in the identity of the arrival at the airport campus.
Keith, it's John Wilking. It's long overdue. There's been several attempts on this corner by more engineering types and less artistic, and glad to see the work on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, as it exists currently, it's really an eyesore.
Yes.
So the applicant's proposing to use the list of materials that Carolyn just described: river birch, stone walls, ornamental grasses, and sculptures. Is the board comfortable, because obviously you all are very familiar with landscape standards that allow credit for things other than trees and shrubs if the project otherwise meets the landscaping standards? So would you guys be comfortable with these elements that are not trees and shrubs being allowed as credit?
I would. I love the stone wall.
I do too. I think it's great.
Yes, at that intersection, I think it's entirely appropriate.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree, John.
Great.
Yeah, Mark, I agree.
Okay. If there's nothing else, item number D, sheet 7 and 9. These sheets show the proposed recreation path. There are no crosswalks at the proposed roadway crossings. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to include information on the concept of how roadway crossings will be achieved on local residential streets in this overall landscaping plan package.
One thing I wanted to say about that is the crosswalks themselves would be maintained by the city. I think that's somewhere else in the staff comments, but it just didn't make it into this paragraph. So the crosswalks themselves, once they're installed, if they're on public streets, we would be maintaining them, which is fine.
Do the plans show that? Yes, they do right there. Yeah, there's one. Is there more than one?
So we don't have the crosswalks identified at this stage, but we're anticipating that there'll be painted lines, and that could be part of the budget if you think that's appropriate.
And this is Keith. I also think that this master plan is a concept, and where we've drawn this rec path, you know, it may move. And I think it's important that the airport and ourselves and the city work together and really fine tune where these are crossing and how that's going to be done. I think what we're asking is, do you agree with this concept? And then moving forward, obviously, as it crosses the road or city property, there's got to be some coordination. And to date, it's been, you know, in our previous meetings, everything's been a really nice dialogue back and forth about our concepts and Marla's and Delilah's concerns. So I think more of that is going to happen probably with the street department and things like that on exact locations.
Okay, is that answer the question, Marla, for you?
I think that what we're starting with a little bit is that this is sort of a pre-approved set of things the airport can draw from, and then more detailed plans will be provided in each stage. So, you know, if this is more detail than is needed at this stage, it may be. You know, I think that the board has definitely talked about how crossings of rec paths happen. You know, is it demarcated with a sign, or is it a light or something in the past? And that was sort of what we're getting at with this comment. But, you know, my previous sentence is sort of to give the board the idea of why we're asking these questions.
No, I get it. There's a high car count, you know, you have concerns. I don't know if we do at that to require anything more than a painted line on the road. Is there another crossing that I'm not seeing here? Somewhere else in this map? So that's a more
Matt, on
heavily
Mark here. Sheet 10, you know, has it crossing Airport Parkway. And I know that I can see the ones like on Kirby and some of the smaller side streets, but I'm just thinking Airport Parkway might want, you know, and again, I'm going to defer to Public Works, but, you know, not just the painted sidewalk, painted crosswalk, but it might even want one of those, you know, the flashing pedestrian crossing signs that you see around that's, you know, manually hit. But,
you know, that's one of those notorious spots where people are going 35 in a 25 zone.
Yes, I would agree. And it's on a curve.
And it might be good to hear from Parks and Rec, the Rec and Park Department, or the Bike and Ped, committee about that. So they certainly have vast experience in dealing with this type of stuff too. So I'd be interested in hearing their take on, you know, where that is necessary and where it's not.
So, Marla, can I ask a quick question? Is this really effectively a sketch plan or a master plan for landscaping? I mean, I'm warm to it, but as Matt said, you know, or maybe it was Mark said, this is not the detail is not there yet, and I assume we're going to see more detail at some point. Is that right?
This is Larry. I mean, as funds become available on projects that need to contribute to this, you know, we would move forward, you know, at the southernmost intersection at Wilson Road and Airport Drive. So we're going to get more detail when the money comes available and we need approval for a certain project. We will start building this.
So Larry, you brought up the magic word. It's my impression that you guys are hemorrhaging money at the moment. Is this some? Yeah, this is sort of as we go forward, as necessary, you'll put the pieces in. But there's no timeline to this.
Well, there's a live document, and when we were planning, when this started, it was pre what's going on right now. we were looking at 10 years because of what we thought what we had on the drawing table, and if it all happens, and there's no guarantee for that. So all we can do is the best we can and develop it in sections as projects develop and see what happens over the next year. So this is more of this is just a master plan, a live document to continue to work on for the future.
Just tagging off on that comment that John had, which is phasing. Like, obviously, as you spend your landscaping budget from the different projects across the airport, of course, you don't know what order those projects will come in or what the required budget will be. But what takes top priority, and what is you'll get to at the at the end. Have you figured that out, Larry? How you prioritize which ones you're going to do? Because we'd like to know, certainly.
I think the only thing we've really settled on is we would start down at the intersection of Williston Road and Airport Drive and work from that area up towards the airport and beyond. We don't have specific phase lines because we don't know when the projects are going to happen, or again, what the budget's going to be for landscaping.
Right. But your priority list has the intersection of Williston Road and Airport Parkway, Kennedy Drive area. Yeah, that's tops.
Yep.
And then where does the rec path go along in that order?
I believe, as Carolyn said, that would be one of the last parts. Or if there was a huge project and there was just a big budget, and there was no landscaping, we would start working on that.
Marla, are they allowed to? Let's suppose that a project gets proposed that needs $30,000 worth of landscaping, and they want to do the corner, and it's going to cost $40,000. Can we keep a running tab and allow them to take the $10,000 credit on the next one? Is that something we ever do?
It's not something we ever do, but a landscape master plan is also not something we ever do.
Essentially banking the credit for future projects within the PUD that have not been approved or even developed or even conceived yet.
So Marla,
It's challenging.
You would consider that it could be done?
I think it's challenging to consider it for projects that aren't yet conceived. But if it's, $10,000 over and we have this next project at sketch plan level, that sounds more reasonable. I'm thinking about the large.
I'm with you, Marla. Yeah, if you have two things going at the same time. Two things going at the same time, you could see the nexus. But banking it for some undetermined project at a later date doesn't seem as reasonable.
Boy, I think it's totally reasonable. I don't know why we can't keep a tab, and I think it could go both ways. I think if their next project was the airport's is coming in front of us. I've been at this for 5 years or something. Stantec or somebody has been in front of us every 3 or 4 months. I just don't see any reason why we can't treat them as a single user with pluses and minuses.
But what about the other way, though, John? When you're talking about them having a project and not meeting their budget, but saying, well, we'll make up for it later, so we could. You're just saying if they go over budget, they can bank the extra, but they can't go under budget on the specific project and say we'll make up for it because we don't have any assurances, given the economics, that there will be later projects.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't have a problem with that, but I understand where you're coming from. I just don't have a problem with it. The airport is a major contributor to our economy, to the town, to everything. I mean, I realize it's Burlington, but that's not,
This is the largest industrial park in the state of Vermont, and it's going to be constantly on the move. Has been for decades and still will be.
Speaking as the zoning administrator for whatever future projects there are going to be, typically those projects have their landscape budget prescribed in the decision, as you know, they're doing X, so therefore they must do Y as their budget based on the improvement that they're doing. It's specified in the decision. So therefore, if they fulfill that, and it's usually tied to, they have to produce that amount to get the first zoning permit, or demonstrate that they're doing it before issuance of first zoning permit. I don't see why I or a future administrator couldn't keep a running tab, as John mentions, of that they fulfilled it because it's issued with a zoning permit. If they go over, having a credit balance towards a future project, again, it would just be a running spreadsheet, but they would have to meet whatever the prescribed amount is for each individual project and fulfill it, because it usually is tied to an action with a permit. I don't think that couldn't, because then a permit couldn't be issued.
That makes sense, Delilah. And it also makes sense that it would have to comply, that any banking of that would have to be applied to projects as delineated in a master plan, and that if it was for something else, that it wouldn't count because it wasn't in the master plan.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, Mark here. Can I just make one comment?
Yep.
Yeah, the only thing I heard in Delilah's comments that I'm wondering about in terms of keeping a running tab is, yes, I totally agree. Every project is standalone and it has a cost, and therefore it has a landscaping budget associated with it. And if the project's landscape budget is way more significant based on the cost of construction than is needed for the site, I could see taking that and adding it to the bank for this master plan project. But if they go over, I'm a little concerned about saying, okay, they have a credit against the next project, because each project should have a certain amount of landscaping associated with it. I'd be concerned about doing another project down the road where they say, well, we're only putting in 30% of our landscape requirements because we went over on 3 of the previous projects, and it comes off as having sparse landscaping.
That is a good point, and I see what you're saying, Mark. Yeah,
that's a great point, Mark.
And if it's connected, if it's connected to two projects that are side by side, I can see that. But
well, could we have
two projects are proposed concurrently or one after the other? But
sorry, could we have a percentage that they could go over and under and bank for the future?
I don't know about under, but maybe over.
Well, listen, folks, I don't think anybody but me has brought this up from the applicant standpoint. So maybe we should just let them propose something if they want to do it.
That's good. Good conversation, though.
I have a scenario just to run by. This is Larry again. So why couldn't it be, and I would only be thinking of this in simple terms. So say we had an area and the budget, we wanted 4 trees, but the budget would only allow for 3. But as long as it was left aesthetically pleasing and presentable and nice, that 4th tree gets planted under the next project. Why wouldn't it be as easy as that? Or say something gets left out and then gets put in the next project in the step of projects.
Larry, I don't have a problem with that as long as there is a next project in the pipeline. And I know what my friend John is saying about things that are going to be in the pipeline, but it would seem to have to be a nexus of where this is going to go, not just the player to be named later, but an actual location based on plans that are in the works.
Okay.
This is Marla. I think I'm hearing 2 questions. One is, if the budget is over, no, sorry, if the budget is $30,000 and in order to complete a segment, it's going to cost $40,000, can that extra $10,000 be banked? The other question I think I'm hearing is, if it can't be banked, does 25% of that section just kind of hang out there until the next project happens? And then it basically, that section only gets 75% built. And so would the question is, would the board be okay with allowing them to build the extra and bank the extra? Or alternatively, would the board be okay with them only building 75% of that segment? Is that not kind of the two questions?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the reason that if they want to spend beyond the landscaping budget, are we essentially giving them, if we want them to push them to, say you want to make that intersection, the gateway to the airport, something special and spend beyond what they're required to spend, are we essentially giving them incentive to do that, giving them credit to spend beyond landscaping budget, because when it comes to further projects, they'll be allowed to bank that as credit? And I can see a compelling reason why you'd want to do that. I don't know. I just talked myself in a circle.
This is Keith Wagner. One of the reasons we were sort of approaching this master plan the way we were is, around the airport campus itself, there are projects that require a certain amount of landscape, but just can't fit for whatever reason on that site to satisfy the requirements of that permit. The thinking was they'd put the landscaping in what they could fit on the site. There's a lot of pavement, there's a lot of restrictions with trees far enough away from fences and things like that, FAA rules. So what they couldn't put in the ground on that particular project, that money would be able to be banked to use for these bigger improvements, i.e. the entry and along Airport Drive. That's where we were thinking that only because there's so many constraints for landscaping within the campus.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Mark was driving at too, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, which is we don't want you to spend twice the amount on the entrance and then spend zero on another project because you don't have to anymore. What we want to do is where you cannot possibly landscape because of these restrictions, being able to, instead of just throwing trees in the middle of nowhere, being able to get credit for spending more where it's required. And however realize that concept, I agree with that.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, Matt, that was where I was going. And I agree completely with Keith, where there's going to be plenty of projects that cost a lot of money, but have no reason to use any landscaping or do any landscaping given the nature of the airport. And that landscape budget should be used for these projects.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we're coming to some sort of consensus here. Where do we move off before we get on that?
So can you just summarize the consensus?
In my mind, the consensus is in areas, in projects in which, as we've seen in the past, I can't name them offhand, but where it's difficult to meet the landscaping budget, that wherever they fall short, that money can then be used for, or where they've banked. So for instance, if they go over above the landscaping budget for one specific project because they have to or they want to or for whatever reason, in other projects that fall short of the landscaping requirement, that excess landscaping that went into the entrance, for instance, can then be used to backfill any percentage or any dollar amount that they could not meet. That doesn't eliminate them from us requiring landscaping for projects just because they've spent a gajillion dollars on the sign out front on Williston Road. But what it does is it allows them where they can't meet that standard to backfill that requirement.
Right. So that's the
Did I
purpose of
explain
the
that right?
landscaping plan in general. Well, purpose of the landscaping plan in general is to allow them to give them a pre-approved place to put landscaping that's not on a particular site. I think what we're saying here is that also the landscaping plan, if they go over because they, it's cheaper to mobilize once and build the whole rec path than to, mobilize 8 times and build it in 8 segments, they can bank that for future projects.
That's what I'd
see
like.
you're saying, Marla.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the only concern I have with that is if they spend, let's just say $1 million to build a rec path, that the next 5 projects down the road don't get substandard landscaping that would be otherwise required.
So the LDRs do have minimum on-site landscaping requirements. And that's one of the comments later is there's sort of these screening and buffering requirements. So I think in approving this plan, the board sets themselves up for having to really understand what those minimum screening requirements are, which they don't typically have to think about because the landscape budget always ends up meeting them. Now, because they can spend some of the landscape budget off-site, what do those screening requirements really mean for the locus of the project? And anything beyond that can be spent off-site.
Well, that makes sense because you're not banking your screening requirements. That's still a requirement of the LDRs. Yeah, that's a good point, Ron.
Yeah, I'm okay with the concept we've discussed and what Marla just said and what Keith has said. I'm pretty confident we can come up with a plan that can move this thing forward.
Okay. So where we're at now is E. Sheets 10 and 11. These sheets on 3 or 4 locations where the proposed recreation path crosses city land, including the recently discontinued Picard Circle, which now contains subsurface stormwater infiltration chambers. Staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant who they intend to be responsible for construction of segments on city land. Once constructed, staff considers that since these crossings are relatively short, the applicant should be responsible for maintenance of these sections of the recreation path and recommends the board include such condition in their approval. The city would be responsible for maintenance of the street crossings. Larry, Carolyn, what's your response to that?
Larry, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I guess if it's on city property, I guess, and it's a city path, I mean, like snow removal and all that type of stuff, wouldn't they be responsible for keeping it clear for the public?
So this path is proposed to be on airport land. Are you proposing to deed it to the city? The portions that are on airport land?
No, I thought you were talking about those properties where the path crosses the city property.
Right. So there's a couple places where it crosses just a tiny bit of city property. It goes from big stretch of airport to a short stretch of city to a big stretch of airport again. So if the airport is maintaining and plowing a big stretch and then there's like a 30-foot, 50-foot gap, our thought was that it made sense for the airport to just continue that piece of it because it's short.
That's fine. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
But then I think that the next one, so sheet 10 and 11, those are the short crossings. And then sheet 13, it goes on to a long segment of city land. And this is right where Delilah has up now. This is sort of where the city's responsibility would begin on this side. And the airport would maintain the airport side, is what we're suggesting.
That's fine if the board's okay with that.
It's fine with here. Okay, item F, sheets 13 and 15, a tributary stream to Centennial Brook is centered on a ravine in the approximate alignment of the path. Staff feels the proposed connection to the existing city trail and natural area would be significant community benefit and supports credit for this connection, but considers that a design taking into consideration the topography of the area is necessary to understand the potential cost and required features to affect the connection. A bridge would likely be necessary towards the end of the airport property.
Do you want to go to sheet
Bridge.
13? So there is a lot of topography centered on this stream. This stream is basically, this is an unnamed trib to Centennial Brook, and it's in a ravine. So this connection, staff supports this connection to the city path on the next page very strongly, but wanted to make sure the airport sort of knows what they're getting into with this guy.
So what's there now? Is there a dirt and informal path there now or nothing?
As far as I know, nothing. Carolyn, you looked into this a little bit though, right?
Yeah. Are you asking if there's a path there already?
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a
Yeah,
path
no,
there.
there's nothing there. We'd be connecting into an existing city trail path.
But you'll be building a bridge over that creek?
That there's going to be at least one crossing, possibly two. But yeah, as we prepare plans down the road, if this is to go through, we would, we'd have to have topographic plans and do construction drawings in order for this to happen. And as again, this is still conceptual.
Yeah, I think the comment is just to recognize that there's some water there that you'll have to deal with.
Yeah, it's a steep ravine.
Staff recommends the board require the applicant to be responsible for the maintenance of the recreation path to the edge of the airport, including any bridge and the city or crossing. The city to be responsible for maintenance once the last segment of the airport property is crossed. The Recreation Parks Director reviewed the plans and has requested that the landscaping transition from the proposed recreation path with plantings to a more utilitarian path at the edge of the city-owned property, as it should be more consistent with the city's maintenance plans for natural areas. Is that agreeable with that last part? Carolyn?
Yeah, we don't really have any plantings suggested anyway at this point, so I think it would be a seamless connection.
Okay, good. Moving on, number 5, the Recreation and Parks Director intends to present this plan to the Recreation and Parks Committee and the Bike and Ped Committee when they resume meeting. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to incorporate feedback from those committees to their plans. You all do that, I assume?
Yep, we'll do our best to accommodate their comments and suggestions.
Great, appreciate that. Item number 6, what is the expected total budget for the proposed plan? How long is the plan anticipated to address the landscaping needs of the airport? Larry, you want to take that? Was this part of your 10 to 15-year plan?
Yes. When we started, we'll, obviously we're coming out of the situation. We're going to have to see, but as you can see, Heritage is moving forward. Beta is moving forward. So if things continue to move forward, it'll happen quicker. And if things don't, then they'll slow down.
Carolyn, how much does this all cost?
We don't really have a read on that at this point, but that's something we can look into.
Okay. Number 7, when a project is proposed that has a space available for landscaping beyond that required by the minimum screening and buffering standard, as the board wishes to define at this time, whether the required landscaping may be spent on site or whether the applicant must further this plan. Marla, is that comment really sort of back what we were talking about before, or what, or provide more context for that for number 7?
I guess I'd just like to put a slightly finer point on it. So there is a screening and buffering standards that are required to be met on site. But say in a magical world, there is a property on the airport that's being redeveloped, and they find that they can meet all the screening and buffering standards and without using their whole landscape budget. And there's 2 options. One is to build it, put the additional landscaping budget on site, put in a nice planter area, maybe make employees go to lunch. The other one is to build 200 feet of brick path. Does the board want to predetermine which of those choices they have to make. Is that clear?
That is clear, Marla. And Matt, my opinion on that is I don't think we can predetermine that at this stage because we don't know what each project's going to entail, because we always look at every project on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say that realistically, the airport can't predetermine it either. So it seems premature. We're dealing with a master plan.
So this is John. Did they need to come back to us at a later point for approval for a less conceptual plan? What is the process, Marla?
Right, so the way we're proposing it is that they would come back when they do a project that they want to use this for. They would come back with a detailed site plan.
But if we were to back to what in regards to what Don is saying, if we were to approve this master plan or this miscellaneous plan, and they were to propose using their landscaping budget for a specific application that was not in conformance with the master plan, would they have to revise the master plan? Or the miscellaneous landscaping plan?
If the landscaping were not on the project site, in the vicinity of the project.
Okay, so they're landscaping a new building they're building. 100% of the money that they're required to spend for landscaping is spent on site. No change to this miscellaneous. What are we calling it? Miscellaneous permit application. But if they were to spend it off-site and it wasn't written or spelled out here, they would in fact have to come and change this in front of the DRB.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that didn't really get captured well.
Does the applicant agree with that assessment or have a counter position?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. Right, that segues into 8, which is to what degree is this plan proposed to be flexible? Staff recommends the board include a condition requiring a detailed landscaping plan to include a plant list, planting, and hardscape details be provided concurrently with a site plan for which the landscaping is proposed to be installed. That makes sense, right? Is there any disagreement with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yes, there's no disagreement. It's double negative. Staff recommends the board require the applicant Staff recommends the board require the applicant to update the plans to show the current property ownership, including shading for city-owned lands and all lands owned by the airport as distinct from lands owned by private entities. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're working on that. That's fine.
Fantastic. Well, look, this is something that we've been asking for a long time. I think this makes a lot of sense. I think this is a tremendous amount of work, good work that's being done here. I'm not sure where we process wise where we go from here. I'm going to open it up for public comments, and then we can talk about that. But is there anything the applicant or board members would like to say before I offer it up for the public to get a chance to speak?
This is Dawn. I just want to say I think it's a great plan, and I think it will really enhance that corner of the city.
Great. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd like to thank Larry for the work and pass along to Gene that it's nice to see improvement in the city. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Gene was very happy and when we reviewed this with him. And, so.
Nice.
Oh, okay, so if anyone in the public would like to make a comment about this miscellaneous permit application, landscaping plan for the airport, 3 options. One is when I ask you to say your name, and then I'll call on you individually, or enter something into the chat function, or to write an email. to mkeene, MKEENE @sperl.com. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Please say your name. Okay, not hearing anyone in the public that would like to speak about this in the public comment period. Not seeing anyone in the chat room. Okay, so Marla, do we continue this for a certain time?
Well, I think we need to continue it for a public comment just because of the meeting snafu.
I agree. But do we need to continue it for next meeting, or is there something that the applicant would like to bring forward to us in response to what you've heard
my
tonight?
question for you, for the board, is staff comments have been addressed, but for number 6, which is what's the expected total budget and how long is the plan anticipated to address landscaping needs?
Well, we did say 10 years.
Right,
we?
but there was
Okay.
you didn't have any answer for budget. So to what degree does the board think that that information is critical to issuing this decision? One thing that Matt said a little bit earlier made me a little bit more anxious about not having a budget, which is, if there's if all the money is spent up at the front, is it for the entrance, is this plan basically pointless because there'll never be any progress further down the road? So that would be the one point I would bring up about budget being a good idea, but I don't feel married to that.
But the budget's related to phasing, but phasing is so wholly determined on what the economy or the powers that be, what projects come forward. So it's running sort of two parallel tracks, which makes this unique. But applicant, what do you have to say about that? Larry or Keith or Carolyn?
This is Keith. One of the things that, we felt that was difficult to come up with a budget is if it's a 10-year master plan, there's going to be inflation. So it was hard to predict. I think as each part of this master plan comes into play and we have the working drawings and we get real numbers, that's when you'll see what the cost is for these improvements. I just think it's a master plan that has to be a working document that is going to probably morph over time. But to project out 10 years, what things are going to cost, what masons are going to charge for stone walls is just is impossible.
Then also speculate what projects are going to move forward and not move forward and how much they're going to cost. Those projects too. So.
Right.
But the only point that I would get at is that it would also help articulate. I mean, there's a lot of great things here for the airport, yes, but for the city of South Burlington, and particularly for the neighborhood around Chamberlain, and understanding that this isn't going to, this doesn't come without the development. The development is what drives landscaping, what drives all of these amenities that everyone wants, although maybe we'll hear differently. So I think the idea of prioritizing phasing is helpful to me, but I'm not sure I'm not sure whether or not I need it in the next document. But
well, I mean, we could certainly break these pieces down using 2020 numbers, just so you had an idea, knowing full well that things are going to cost more.
Yeah, the idea wouldn't be to say this is your landscaping budget that a project's going to come in, we're going to hold you to. It's just sort of to give you an idea of what these things cost and what it will take in terms of, if we're going to realize or actualize this plan, we're going to there's going to be significant projects in this PUD that is the airport. And that needs to be, I think, recognized by everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Larry,
Keith,
are you all right with that?
Yeah, let's do a takeoff and see, come up with an estimate of what this is worth. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Right.
I'm sure Larry's curious as I am. But the other thing that it would do is it would give you an idea that the front entrance represents 20% of the total, and you know, you'd be able to work forward from that. I think it would be helpful.
Absolutely. Okay. We'll do it.
Great.
All right, so given that, should we continue for the next meeting or continue for the month out? What does anyone have a strong opinion here?
How long do you think that'll take you to prepare?
Not long. I mean,
Not real long. I mean, I think
next couple of weeks.
Like Friday or Monday?
No, probably not Friday.
Okay, then we can't put you on the next meeting.
Oh,
no, but I think no, probably not the next meeting. But I guess my hope is that you see, as a board, that we're putting together this master plan and we're working with you and trying to satisfy what you requested of the airport. So if it has to go out another, not the next meeting, but the following meeting, are you all right with that as a board? And
Let me give a context to that a little bit.
Okay.
The context of that is that the airport has several balls in the air right now, which are relying on this because of that condition requiring it to be developed. So if the board says, we're generally okay, we agree that you're progressing this, you've got a rescheduled hearing, we've seen it, those projects can move forward, and this doesn't necessarily have to be finalized before those projects can be heard for preliminary plat.
Okay.
Right. So June 2nd would be the next day after the 19th.
Yeah, so that one is real full.
Marla, we're on June 5th for the apron. Do we just want to do it then?
June 2nd. Yeah, I guess that's true since you're already there.
As long as it doesn't
Right.
impact the other projects, you know.
But it is good to get the related projects together too.
Okay, so Marla, if that's all right.
So
I
here's
move
my
that we-
caveat with June 2nd.
Okay.
If we do June 2nd, I'm not going to have the time because I have so many other things to prepare for that night and for May 19th. You're not going to get a draft decision. You're going to get a draft decision with a plug-in for a number if we do June 16th. That being said, you're still going to get your decision around June 16th. So we can either do it on June 2nd, have a conversation, but not a lot of advanced staff legwork. And that staff legwork will happen for June 16th, regardless of whether we hear it on the 2nd or the 16th.
Is that all right, Larry?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think the condition was just to get the plan submitted, and we put a lot of effort into this, and we're moving forward. So.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Marla, for that brutal honesty. I appreciate it. I would move that we continue miscellaneous application MS 2001 or Burlington International Airport till June 2nd.
I would second that. This is Dawn.
Seconded by Dawn. Roll call. Brian Sullivan.
Aye.
Don Filbert.
Aye.
Mark Bear.
Aye.
Melissa Portman.
Aye.
Jim Langdon.
Aye.
John Wilking.
Aye.
And Matt Coda is an aye. We'll see you on June 2nd. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 8, sketch plan application SD 2015 of Don Stewart to amend previously approved plan for an airport complex. The amendment consists of constructing the 17,200 square foot two-story addition to an existing 39,200 square foot one-story existing hangar office building, reconfiguring the adjacent parking area and related site plan improvements at 1150 Airport Drive. Who is here for the applicant?
I am Don Stewart. I'm here for the applicant. Also, Chris Gendron from Stantec. I trust you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, Don. Don and Chris. Anyone else for your team?
Larry Lackey's still here too.
Carolyn Orman will be speaking. We also have present Joel Page, who is our architect. And along with that, we have both Billy Newton and Kyle Clark from Beta.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, forgive me for this explanation, but I want to make sure that anyone on the phone or watching this at home later on understands what we're doing here. This is a sketch plan, so no one's being sworn in here. What is a sketch plan? A sketch plan is a high-level review and discussion where the applicant receives feedback from us, the board, on major elements of a project before it is fully designed. During the meeting, the board may provide oral guidance to the applicant, which constitutes the board's determination that the application meet the purposes of the land development regulations. These comments are to help guide the applicant to a later application that meets the LDR requirements and contributes to the goals of the comprehensive plan. This is not a formal hearing. This does not result in a binding decision. There will be no vote. The board may choose to continue this meeting at a later date if there are questions that remain to be examined. The future date will be announced prior to concluding the item for the evening. Upon conclusion of the sketch plan meeting, the applicant who wishes to move forward with the project will have to submit a complete application. Next level review includes additional public notices and a formal public hearing. We're here to provide guidance as to whether this very preliminary proposal for developing this property needs to be refined in order to comply with South Burlington's land development regulations. This review will allow staff or the public an opportunity to provide input and recommendations to the applicant. And with that,
Matt,
tell us a little bit about.
Matt, can I interrupt? It's John Wilking.
Sure, go ahead.
I just need to speak to conflicts. I don't think there's a conflict of any kind, but Don Stewart and I have known each other for 30 years. We're friends. Our wives grew up in the same town together. So I'm just bringing up that we have no financial conflict of any kind, but if anybody sees an issue, I will step aside.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Okay. Don, do you want to walk us through what you've got planned?
I appreciate that. I'd like to just start out and talk for a couple of minutes about Beta Technologies. Beta Technologies is building electric vertical takeoff and landing airplanes. They are a cutting edge technology. Just as a case, so the project we are proposing is, as you said, it's an addition to an existing building at 1150 Airport Drive, and the commensurate site improvements to make it fit with the landscape plan that's just been discussed. In 2017, and Carolyn, could we pull up the picture, one of the pictures that we sent to you today? There's a picture of a horizontal picture of the entire building. And also I'd like to be prepared to bring up the C102 drawing. Those two drawings, those were sent to you today. Those both help understand the current situation. I think it's important to understand that in 2017, Beta did not exist, and 1150 Airport Drive was an underused, outdated, and decrepit building that was owned by the airport. And if you fast forward to today, Beta Technologies has 72 employees. The front end of the building has been largely renovated, except for the front end, which is we are in the process of renovating right now. And Beta has moved from a startup company to being one of the most advanced companies in the world working on battery-powered flight. And by the end of 2020, they will have over 100 employees. 1150 Airport Drive will be a fully functioning research, developing, and manufacturing facility. And the project we are proposing to you tonight will hopefully be under construction. We have an opportunity to keep a fast-growing, sustainable, cutting-edge technology company in South Burlington. And in order for them to grow in this intensely competitive market, they need to expand, and they need to expand quickly. There are a few things that are really interesting about Beta that perhaps lend to understanding why it's important for them to be here. Beta has been seriously courted by a number of economic development organizations who have offered astronomical amounts of money to try to induce Beta to move out of Vermont. And Beta has resisted this because Beta wants to be in Vermont, and they want to be here for a number of reasons. And the benefits of Beta being here are very broad. They've obviously taken a building that is in that was really in desperate need of shape and was a real eyesore next to the airport. They're turning it into a state-of-the-art corporate headquarters, and that alone is important. They're beautifying the site in front of the building tremendously. And a couple things about Beta is that the Beta has a culture that includes people, and they are harvesting right now many of the abilities of the brightest minds in Vermont. They're also reversing some of the brain drain that many of us have watched over the years as our children have left to take jobs in other places that don't exist. Beta is bringing back many of those kinds of jobs to Vermont. And they are also bringing in about 30% of their employees are coming in from other states, which means we are bringing the finest, the best aerospace people in the country here, because Beta's eVTOL process is really going to be the revolutionary future of flight. And Beta is having tremendous monetary impact. 80% of the jobs that they have now are high-paying engineering jobs. They also are spending approximately 70% of the money that Beta is generating right now on outside of the building. In other words, they are helping to fund local manufacturers, including metal fabricators, electronic suppliers, composite parts manufacturers, and construction companies. They are doing a tremendous job of that. They are also producing already spin-off businesses. There's a company called Biocognitive that has been spun off. And recently in the news, I think people were probably made aware of a company called AutoVent. And it has been wholly proposed and started and operated by Beta employees to produce a low-cost, highly portable, easy-to-use ventilator to help deal with the local pandemic. And that's just a couple of really brief examples, but other businesses will be starting because of Beta. Beta is so unique because they are proving that green and sustainable is not at odds with the real economic world. And they are perhaps most important, bringing to Vermont a technology culture that we so desperately need in the changing world. So I think, yes, South Burlington and Vermont would be really well served to help Beta stay here and grow. And this project is pivotal to making that happen. That's our introduction. So we're prepared to go through the questions that you have and answer any that come up along the way. Both Chris and Carolyn will be speaking on different aspects of the questions that you have, and Joel, if need be, as well. So we're ready to proceed any way you'd like.
Great, Don, I appreciate that introduction. I should have mentioned in the outset that back in January, I did take a tour of Beta Technologies. I should have disclosed that. And I did try the flight simulator, which I crashed almost immediately. But yes, it is an impressive site. It's impressive what this company has done. I just want to disclose that I have some familiarity with the company.
So this is
but let's
Dawn.
go ahead, Don.
This is Dawn here. So I see on the staff report, the owner and the applicant is the airport. What is Beta's relationship to the airport? Are you leasing airport land? Could you connect those dots for me, please?
Certainly could. Beta is a leasee of the airport. Leasor. Well, they're leasing a piece of property, and if we could bring up that C-102 document, which is again, it's in the list of documents that we supplied earlier today, not in the original documents. There is a space around Dawn in front of the building that is part of Beta's lease. There is some space around the building, both on the south and the north and the east side of the building that they are leasing. the building, there we go. So you can see the project limits there in red. And you can also see the outline, basically a square 160 square foot building that is the currently houses Beta. So that is the limits of the project that we are talking about outlined in red. But the property does belong to the airport.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, I was starting with staff comment number 1. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant whether the existing or planned right-of-way is shown on the plans to determine if a height waiver is available based on the setbacks alone. If the applicant is not eligible for a waiver by providing increased setbacks, staff considers the board may only grant a height waiver by considering the project as a PUD, which allows the board to request additional improvements to offset the impacts of the requested waivers. So John, you understand what we're asking there regarding the setbacks?
We do. And Chris Gendron from Stantec is going to answer. Chris, are you ready to answer on that one?
Yes, hi everyone. This is Chris Gendron from Stantec. So what we did is we did use the planned right of way as indicated in the LDRs to determine the setback. And what we found is that the proposed structure that's going to be proposed at 45 feet tall is 36 feet back from that right of way, or from that setback from the planned right of way. So with the logic explained in the comment, that would allow us to be above that threshold of a foot per additional setback. So we're providing 36 feet of additional setback.
Hey, Chris,
Okay, so
it's John Wilking. Are you aware of the radar concerns that occurred with the hotel that was just to the north of there?
Oh, of course I am, John.
Okay.
All
Have you
too familiar with
taken a look at
Beta.
radar concerns with this?
Yes, Beta has their own staff working on that, specifically working with the FAA to determine if there are going to be any height restrictions. And at this point, there hasn't been any indications that this is the same situation, but it's very close to my heart. So I've brought it up many, many a times, and I've submitted whatever documents I could to assist Beta in that matter. But there is a permit in, and they're working with the FAA to resolve it.
John, this is Don Stewart. If I may step in, Beta filed a 74, what they call a 7460 on 214 to address all of these issues, and have been in very close communication with the FAA. And the FAA has looked at this and has posed no initial objections, but that's not the same as making a ruling. So we are certainly aware of this, and it's critical to our plan.
So this is Marla. If there's no other comments on the FAA stuff. Okay. Sounds like Chris is suggesting that they would like the board to consider the setbacks on just the portion of the building that exceeds the maximum height. That's not spelled out in the LDR. It just says the Development Review Board may approve a structure with a height in excess of the limitations. For each foot of additional height, all front and rear setbacks shall be increased by 1 foot, and all side setbacks shall be increased by 1/2 foot. So I guess it's up to the board to interpret whether that can be applied to a portion of the structure, or if the structure needs to be considered as a whole.
I don't recall this request before. Mark, does this sound familiar to you?
Well, I mean, the notion that we only apply the portion of the building that, typically a building falls under, getting tongue-tied. Basically, even if the height that it's exceeding and it's in the back of the building, if the front of the building is within the setback or doesn't have that distance setback for the height waiver they're asking for, that doesn't negate it.
Yeah, and we've always been fairly flexible on. Of course, it's typically been with PUDs, but always been flexible on height.
So by the definition, this is a PUD because all projects in the ARI district are PUDs.
Oh, okay.
Considering
Well
that
then,
as a PUD does allow the board to ask for mitigation for these waivers.
I wasn't clear on that from the staff report. So it is a PUD.
Yep, all applications in the ARI district have to be a PUD.
Okay, thank you.
So they may, based on if we don't. So what we're saying is that you're going to need a height waiver, right? Is that what we're saying then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could
yeah, but one of the things they're doing here is vastly improving the look of the building. So
Yes,
this is fairly simple.
No, my only concern with the height waiver is we get in trouble with the FAA.
Well, if we get in
Sorry,
trouble
guys.
with the FAA, they just overrule us. But I think to the extent that we can, and it sounds like we have the authority to do so, we should grant the height waiver.
Right. Okay. Maximum allowable setback is 30% for all non-residential uses. Staff recommends the board consider whether to apply this standard to the project area or the airport PUD as a whole. Wait, why am I? Marla, can you explain what I just read?
And what are the advantages and disadvantages?
So the airport PUD encompasses many buildings. It encompasses the terminal and Heritage and Beta and all these other things. Maximum front setback coverage for commercial properties is 30% citywide. So if you're a car dealer, you can't have more than 30% of your 50-foot setback covered in cars and parking for cars. So this project appears to exceed the 30% front setback coverage if it were only considered by itself. So if you, Delilah, flip to the sheet that shows the limits of the project with the big, thick red line.
Could we use the, it might help to explain this if we were to use the C102 drawing that we sent along today that I asked that Delilah put up, that might actually help explain this because it has the setback lines on it as well.
Okay. All right, let me see. Is that in the supplemental, Marla?
It is. Called Beta Plans.
There we go.
I have.
Yep, that guy. Nope, the one you're on.
Not that one?
No, the other one, that's the correct one.
So the front setback, zoom in. Front setback has, quite a lot of impervious cover in it. And if you can sort of imagine for a moment the proposed plan, there's a lot of coverage in the proposed plan as well. And only 30% of that front setback is allowed to be covered for commercial properties. I don't think that the board has precedent on considering individual properties or individual projects in the airport or the airport PUD as a whole. So I kind of tried to think about this. What if this were a different PUD? What if this were the projects along Fayette Road, for instance? Would we consider it as a whole or would we consider each individual phase? And if that helps the board to think about it in that context, I don't know. What is the board's thought on whether to consider it for the airport as a whole or for just this project area?
Marla, it's John. I think there's a couple of questions here because you've got a pre-existing building that they're adding on to, so it's not at all like Fayette Road. It's are they improving on the impervious in the front? And even if they, and I think they are, right?
I don't think they are. I think they're expanding the front setback coverage.
Oh, you think there's more coverage?
Mm-hmm. But then that's the whole parking issue, which is
I would agree with Marla that it does appear because the parking to the right is existing, part of the parking to the left is existing, but then the continued curve and curb cut out onto Airport Parkway for Airport Drive looks like it's all new.
Well, this is Brian. There was a comment earlier on, and I'm paraphrasing John, I hope I get it right, that the airport is essentially the largest industrial park in the state of Vermont. I think the important part of that comment as applied to this question is that it is essentially an industrial park. It is a unit, so I don't have a problem considering the airport PUD as a whole here, because I think the airport is different than any other PUDs that we're going to see in South Burlington.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brian.
Hi, this is Carolyn. I just wanted to point out that part of what looks to be parking is a plaza that's created with permeable pavers, if that helps the image at all.
What do you mean by plaza, Carolyn?
There's you'd have to kind of zoom in on it, but there's a plaza that overlaps the parking lot. It's an entry plaza, comes from that main entry on the north. Yep. And that's been created with, or will be created with, permeable pavers.
But
So
that's
it's like a
largely out of the front setback. The front setback is that black dash line just below.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
I think this is Don Stewart. I think one thing to consider here, and certainly we are altering what is in the setback. But if you look at the total amount of green space that is being provided, including what we're doing in front of the building and to the north of the building, there's actually more green space in this building than there is now. In this new plan, there's actually more green space. There just happens to be less of it in the setback area, but it dramatically improves the total overall sense of what the building is. And as an ancillary answer to that question, would it be worthwhile to have Carolyn just sort of explain why she did what she did? Matt, would that make sense?
Sure. Go ahead, Carolyn. No, go ahead.
Okay. So the parking area and entry drive were designed to accommodate the expected number of cars and also to create an attractive entry drive and parking area. So we came up with this drive that arced through the site in a more elegant way, and also allowing passengers to be dropped off at the entry plaza. The curved parking and drive make the movement through the site easier and more effective than what's currently there now, also safer. To complement the generous building entrance, I was just going to go into the part about the entrance plaza, but the entrance plaza does move from the building entrance out into the plaza, kind of like a carpet, and it's composed of permeable pavers. And then there's a series of bollards that run along the drive path to separate vehicular and pedestrian traffic. So we just felt like this was a much more elegant and more refined way, and much easier parking.
Yeah,
Yeah, just to add
there's no real green space against the building right now. Is that right?
Yeah, just to touch on that. Yeah, there's no green space in front of the building, and the parking today is very difficult to maneuver around if you're parking there. It doesn't meet the city's current. It likely doesn't meet the city's current standards for aisle widths and parking stall lengths. And what we're doing here is trying to bring this parking lot up to standard to make it better for circulation, make it better aesthetically, make it better for emergency vehicle access. We made sure the curb lines would allow a fire truck to enter and exit the site from 2 locations. So it provides ultimate flexibility for them. We wanted to provide accessible parking spots on the building side to ensure that, you know, they don't have to cross the roadway to get in. So there was a lot of you know, considerations going into how this parking layout was set up.
We could also mention at this point that one of the comments that was made was about parking perhaps being put on the side or the back of the building. And right now, Beta uses 14 parking spots on the south side of the building. But both the north side and the east side of the building, and you're looking at, if you could put that picture back up there for a second, thank you. You are looking, there's a great example of what the building looks like now. And you're looking from the northeast, basically standing out by the road, looking sort of you're looking southeast. Anyway, the addition is going where that 1-story portion of the building is. As you can see, there is fencing along the north side of the building. So the existing building, the new building, will be right up against the fence line, and that's the limit of the Beta lease area. So there is no area on the north and the east side, because that's part of the airport property and part of the controlled area. So we really don't have options to go on the north or the east. So we did our best to try to accommodate the parking that was demanded in basically with a similar to what's existing, just a slightly different configuration to accommodate all the needs that Chris talked about.
Right, which bleeds into comment number 3, which the board has to determine whether or not that this front setback coverage applies to the airport as the whole, and if so, then we would waive the application requirement to provide a calculation of the front setback coverage. Or if the board determines that the setback coverage applies to the project area, the applicant must be under the maximum, not exceed the current in the case of existing nonconformity. So if that were the case, there would have to be parking spaces removed and green space put in, right?
It's hard to see in this version of the plan, but don't change it though, Delilah. I'm just going to draw on it. I think the existing parking line is more like that. So if all of the proposed parking stayed to the above that line, then they wouldn't have a problem based on the board's precedent.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're talking about what, 8 spaces, 5 spaces?
Yeah, my line's not very good though, because it actually cuts kind of through a lot of the middle ones. And actually, there's a lot more information on that parking issue farther down, so maybe we just want to table it for the time being.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah. All right.
But the front setback coverage, I would like to suggest we go back to that after we talk about parking, please.
After we talk about what?
After we talk about parking, come back to the front setback coverage
Okay.
to make that determination on whether it applies to the, or unless the board's ready now to decide what they are, you know, we don't make decisions in sketch plan. If members would like to express their opinions about whether it should apply
Right.
to the PUD as a whole or to the project area.
I stated on the outset, we're not hearing a vote, but me personally, I think it should apply to the airport as a whole. This is, as Brian put it, this is a unique situation to the airport PUD. But any other board members have a similar or contrary opinion or different opinion, please, it'd be the time to give guidance to the applicant individually.
It's John. I'm of the opinion that we should be as flexible with the airport as we can be, because there's going to be lots and lots more stuff coming at us over the years. I don't mean to give away the show, but there's they've got an awful lot of land over there that could be very economically positive for the city, and I think we should be as flexible as we can. So I'm of the opinion that if looking at the airport as a PUD as a whole is the most flexible, that's what I'd do.
Yeah. Anyone else before I move on?
That's to me.
Okay, Don. Thank you.
The only comment, and I'm not sure this is relevant now, but it sounds like you have a very impressive aerospace technology plant or whatever organization happening. Do you foresee in the future that this particular building, as imagined here, will provide you with a capacity for growth that you might experience?
Don, this is Kyle. Do you mind if I jump in?
No, by all means,
Go ahead,
Kyle.
The short answer is no. This is the research and development facility, and we won't be producing certified aircraft out of here. There's areas that we've submitted letters of intent on in the south area of the airport where we would be doing potential production, very, very preliminary. But this is where we would host visitors and do the research and development portion.
Okay, thank you. Like Matt doing the simulator.
No, that's the whole development review board.
Yeah, and in all honesty, everybody's welcome over there. But there's 80 acres south of the airport that are accessible through the back of Pete's RV right now, where we've considered future manufacturing sites.
Okay.
And it was formerly called the pit.
Matt, can I have a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
So, I'm leaning towards accepting it as using the whole airport as the PUD for the front yard lot coverage. I just do want to throw out there the fact that, while I think this, Beta Technologies looks like a phenomenal company. I love the growth they're doing, the brain trust they're bringing into Vermont, but we don't approve companies, we approve projects. And I just want to make sure the board keeps that in mind as we review these projects, that we don't sort of jump on the bandwagon of approving Beta Technologies. We're approving a site plan, and a building that we're not saying great, we're approving Beta, we're approving a building and a site. I do think that the site is being improved. I think that you're getting, well, you're not going to even come close to 30%. I think with the amount of landscaping, the building improvement, the green space up against the building, I can look at it being swayed that way. I just want to make sure that we as a board stay on our purview.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Mark. Okay. Item number 4. Supplemental standards for industrial and airport districts. Within airport districts, parking areas must be designed for efficient internal circulation and the minimum number of curb cuts onto the public roadway. This project shares a curb cut with the building to the north. It appears that the curb cut to the south, so it's only this project. Staff recommends the board discuss whether to request the applicant close one of the existing curb cuts, or whether this condition may be allowed to persist as an existing curb cut to be retained. Marla, go ahead.
Can I add one clarification just so everyone understands? The southern access, that southern entry is access to the airfield. It's not just for Beta. It's for emergency vehicles. It's for operations. It's used all the time. It's the main gate to the airfield. So it is an access to the parking area, but it's also a major route for the airport.
The 2 curb cuts that we're seeing, they currently exist, right? Correct?
Yep, and they both currently exist.
Yeah, and they're both in use. I'm not sure why we would want to request to close a curb cut here. Other than our LDRs don't like extra curb cuts, but I don't know if this is extra.
As a note, so the southern curb cut is a shared curb cut. The northern curb cut is also a shared curb cut because Beta is accessed through that curb cut. And all the way on the left there, you'll see just a partial outline of what's called Building 6. And that Building 6 has both rental space that the airport rents out, that the parking is on the airport drive side, and it is a shared facility both between BTV and JetBlue on the controlled side. So that northern, the northern driveway is also a shared drive.
Okay. All right, moving on to item number 5.
Well, so have we given our opinion? I mean,
well, I think in my opinion is that we keep the 2 curb cuts.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I agree.
Okay, parking. Parking shall be located to the rear sides of the building. Any side of the building facing a public street shall be considered a front side of the building for the purposes of this subsection. Existing site is parking located to the front of the existing building. The applicant is proposing 32 parking spaces which are nearer to the street than the existing parking, including 28 single-loaded parking spaces which front directly on the street. It also appears the applicant is proposing to reconfigure the parking north of the north driveway. So it's not clear whether the proposed parking is nearer the street than the existing parking. It appears the parking to the south of the site is located in the same footprint as the existing non-conforming parking. The board is familiar with exceptions to the parking requirement that parking shall be located to the rear sides of the building. The board may only approve the minimum non-compliant parking to overcome the conditions which warrant exception, including parking needed to meet ADA requirements, unique site conditions such as utility easements or unstable soils, and existing buildings to be reused that preclude parking to be located to the rear and sides of the building. I'm sorry for the long explanation, but there's some that might not be seeing this. A further note is the applicant's proposed parking configuration impacts several large existing trees in the north end of the proposed parking lot. These trees provide screening and support the applicant's proposed overall landscaping plan goals, as well as the landscape buffer along Airport Drive. Staff considers that removal would be a detriment in addition to requiring replacement above and beyond the minimum landscaping budget. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to reconfigure their proposed parking to comply with the parking location standards. Options may include locating the parking to the sides of the rear, reducing the number of proposed parking spaces, no minimums exist, or limit the proposed parking to within the footprint of the existing parking area if the board considers the existing site to preclude parking to the sides and the rear. We lost the parking.
Just showing, this is the existing layout today. I can go back to the other one.
Oh, I see what you're trying to show us. Right. So where it says TNC shared lot, is that going to be substantially? This is to the applicant. Is that going to be substantially altered under the new plan?
Oh, well, it will be paved. Right now, it's a dirt lot, and it will be fully paved.
And the trees that are there, or do they staying, or they move, or are they going?
Carolyn, you want to add?
Yeah, so we're hoping to transplant one of them, and the others will be removed, but we're replacing them in kind, using a form that Marla had provided for me. So we are replacing them, and I actually did take pictures of all those trees, and they're really not in great shape to begin with.
Are we still talking about just the south portion of the parking where it says TNC shared lot?
Mm-hmm. The cedar screen.
Isn't that?
No, we're talking about the trees that are being displaced by parking.
The trees that are being displaced are on the north side. Is that right,
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The trees in front of the TNC or whatever you were calling that it's a arborvitae hedge, and that's gonna stay. And we're also adding shade trees all along on the inside of the between the parking lot and the hedge, and all the parking lots all the rest of the parking has shade trees added at the perimeter. So we're using quite a bit of plant material to create shade and screening.
Okay, the other note with parking locations.
Right.
the
So the board has historically been very strict about not expanding existing nonconformities as it pertains to parking. So what the board has allowed at some times and other times has said, nope, you can't even do that, is the board has allowed the applicant to reconfigure the parking, the non-conforming parking within its own footprint, but not to expand it. Here, they're proposing to expand the nonconformity by bringing the parking even closer to the street, even more in front than it already is today.
Can I ask a question, and maybe it's more of a beginning statement, but I think in looking at the 1406, the general review standards, they are provided to allow the designer to exercise some creativity and invention and innovation while improving the visual appearance of the city of South Burlington. And I think that is in part what Carolyn exercised with that sort of creativity. And it appears to me that as you read through the rest of this, that the DRB may approve parking between a public street and one or more buildings if the board finds that one or more of the following criteria are met, one of them being the parking area necessary for the ADA, the unique site conditions, and the lot contains one or more existing buildings that are to be reused and parking needs cannot be accommodated to the rear and sides of the existing building. So and I realize that Marla's talking about a very specific case, and I understand that, but it does appear to me that in the general scope of what the DRB is supposed to be able to do is to approve this situation.
And the unique case is that you can't park cars on the runway. You can't put cars behind the building here.
Yeah, we can't. And you could see the plane out there to the left, and that literally is they park planes there, Matt.
Yeah, that's a Google Earth image back on there.
But they literally do park. They have a marked out parking space right there for an airplane. So we're not going north. The east side of the building, just so you know, has a 110-foot wide overhead door that is how they access that space. So that's the center part of the hangar. It's 120 feet wide. The door is 110 feet wide. So you're eliminating the possibility of anything being done there because they move the planes in and out there.
And then on the south side of the building, ahead of where that purple bus is or whatever, against the building, there's nothing. What's there?
There are 14 spots there, and 8 of them are Tesla charging stations. The rest of it is taken up by a small amount of landscaping and some pieces of mechanical equipment that had to be placed there because of building limitations. But there are 14 parking spots on the south side now that will remain.
Okay. So where are we at here, Marla?
Well, so I think we need some feedback on whether the board's going to allow them to do what they're proposing, or whether the board would consider that a not allowed expansion of nonconformity. I know it.
Well, limiting the
frankly,
proposed
the Frank's
parking
not on
within the
board.
footprint of the existing parking area.
I'm sorry, Matt. Was that a question? I'm not sure I understood it if it was.
No, I'm trying to understand the what our options are, Don.
Okay.
Delilah, can you zoom in? I know I can zoom in too, but it'd be good to zoom in for everyone.
What part? Just the lot area?
The parking in the front, if you don't mind.
How's that?
Maybe tighter?
A little tighter?
Awesome.
So,
So this
what are the
line
new,
here
what are the
is
new
the,
spots?
this is the existing parking.
Okay. Which is non-conforming.
Which is non-conforming. So everything in this area is an extension of the non-conformity. Now I see a potential loophole.
Which is what?
What if the parking, and I know we're not designing it for them, what if the parking in the drive aisle were flip-flopped? Then the drive aisles are allowed to be in the front. And then it would not be an extension of the existing non-conformity.
Say that again. What do you mean by that?
So instead of having the drive aisle on the back, page up, if the drive aisle were on the bottom of the page where the yellow highlight is and the parking spaces are against the building.
Parking is
it would not be an
perpendicular
extension,
to the building.
right? And head in or facing towards the building rather than facing towards the street.
Chris, what do you think about that?
The one challenge that immediately comes to mind is when I was doing my fire truck movements through the site. It does hinder that a little bit. It does make that a little more difficult because you did want a lot of room to have to make that left turn. I don't know if it's possible, but I also like the fact that you had trees and a nice elegant face to the building, but no, I don't have a good answer right now whether it'll work or not.
We do have some encumbrances in that there are some sidewalks that lead into doors along that building. There's also some mechanical equipment that is on the ground. And I think I would like to reiterate what Chris just said. Carolyn very carefully tried to accommodate, and I recognize Marla's statement in this completely. Yes, we are encroaching further, but we were trying to make the building look, give it an appropriate sense of Vermontness, and using these trees to break up the facade of the building to make it really just as absolutely attractive as it possibly could be. And she's got low plantings below there. And if we do have to move the parking, obviously we could do that, but we will lose all of that benefit. And at some point, we're going to get somewhere where we come out on the north side. We are going to get further. We're almost without trying. We're going to hit a spot where we're going to be further into the nonconformity than we are now because of the way the driveway is built now. But I don't know how we can certainly try that. And if that's what the board wants, that's what we will do. But if there is a way to consider this as it is drawn, we really think we've produced something that is tremendously elegant and just it's the right scope and the right look for what the airport and what South Burlington is trying to do. So that, but it isn't perfect.
Don, it's John. It's not what the board wants to do. It's what we're able to do in a lot of cases. And so the question here is where is the loophole? And I think, for me, the loophole is that we have unique site conditions that force the parking to be in the front. I don't have a problem with the parking shown the way it is, but it would be certainly a change of how we've typically dealt with these things, but we don't typically have a runway sitting on behind the building either. So that's unusual.
May I suggest something to the board? This is Delilah.
Go ahead, Delilah.
Because I hear what John's saying and Marla and Matt, and that this does set a precedent, but that there are constraints on the site that are unique to this site and this PUD. The applicant is proposing permeable pavers for their plaza. What if they were to expand that amenity throughout this drive area and parking area that is, they're asking the board to accept something that they haven't accepted before by any other applicant. If there was an expanded amenity, would that be something to consider? Beyond the trees, but the permeable pavers to increase, to lessen the runoff. This is a very paved, the airport's very paved.
Yeah. Look, I think the cars where they are makes sense. I understand we don't want cars in front of buildings. This is a unique circumstance. I'm struggling with trying to come up with a loophole that might make the building not look as nice. But
Matt, can I have a comment?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement on all of those. I do agree that there are site constraints that are unique to it, and we have in the past approved parking in the front of a building when there was other issues that prevented it from being moved to other parts, power lines, easements, wetlands. But and the one thing that I'm struggling with is what John had said, is it's not what we want to do, it's what we can do. And as much as I completely agree that this layout is a very nice layout, I like it. I like the plantings and the green space and the trees and shrubs up against the building. I like the curvilinear to the access drive and parking, the way it sort of fans out. It is a pretty significant impact in further to the front of what was previously there. So it's almost like a twofold encumbrance on the site. Not only does it increase the front yard coverage, which we were already talking about, giving them some latitude by calling the whole project a PUD, not just the area that the project's impacting, but now we're also bringing the parking closer to the front of the street rather than keeping it where it was. I guess I'm trying to play, devil's advocate and saying I would like to see what it would do if we were to flip the drive aisle and the parking aisle. I'm not saying flip it and push the parking right up against the building, but even just if there's a way to sort of almost flip it and keep the same pavement delineations. I understand Chris is going to have a little bit of trouble with the fire truck turning radius. You may have to play around with that, but if we go through that exercise and you still can't do it, that at least gives us some latitude to say we've looked at all the options.
Would you lose some spots too if you flipped it where the plaza is too? You'd have cars going into the entrance too, but
yeah, you would lose 5 or 6 or 7 spots.
Can I ask a question? Is the park, because obviously we don't have parking standards in South Burlington anymore, is what you're showing what you need for the operation of the building?
So if you go by industry standard, we are going to be well below industry standard for minimum parking requirements. However, if you go with what most municipalities around, major municipalities like South Burlington, they're going to try to limit the amount of parked cars you can have. So going by that logic, based on square footage of office space, it's about 3 three parked cars, or three parked cars per 1,000 square feet of office space. That's kind of more in line with where we are. So by doing that, by limiting the amount of parking below the industry demand, we're encouraging transit use and bicycle commuting and carpooling at this spot.
Right, but my question is, you have a specific tenant for this building. They have plans for expansion. They have a current number of employees and a current number of maxed out employees at this site. Is this the correct amount of parking, or could they live with less? Not what industry standards is, because as we know, there's no parking standards in the cities of Burlington anymore. It's commercial.
Yeah.
So just to give you like a range, I mean, they're 50 spaces short right now. So to limit it any more would be pretty significant to their business.
Okay. That answers my question.
The other thing is we're not increasing, even though it does change the how we interact with the setback, we are not actually increasing the number of parking spaces.
Yeah, we're not trying to increase. We're just trying to increase the circulation and the aesthetics of the site. It's not meant to increase the number of parking spots.
So
Sorry, go ahead,
say
Tom.
you're 50 parking spaces short right now?
Yes. No, sorry, not right now. Under the proposed condition,
Okay.
with new hangar addition in place, it would be 50 spots, roughly 50 spots short of industry standard based on the trip generation manual.
Industry standards, not what your workforce requires.
Correct. I mean, what it's going to do is it's going to force people to bike to work, use transit, find other places to park.
Is there cooperation from the airport for the garage or employee parking at the airport?
That's an unknown, John. The question is, what do you do when the airport is full? So there may be, but that's not something that we're guaranteed at this point by the airport.
John, this is Kyle Clark again. The plan right now is exactly what we did. I was formerly at Dyna Power on the management team there, and as you guys know, we struggled with parking there when we went through our growth. And we did a heavy incentivization for employees to bike, carpool, and walk to work, which a massive amount of the took advantage of on a pay per mile basis. And it was economically a benefit to the company, and it worked really well in reducing the congestion in the parking. And we've sponsored an internal bike team, and we are doing the same thing at Beta to reduce the amount of people driving. We'll manage that. We have inside the building right now, we actually have a bike parking room, and it's utilized continuously.
Does that work in the winter as well?
I've ridden home at 30 below zero. Yes. No, it is.
Wow.
It does. And as Don said, we've got a company-wide incentive plan already on electric vehicles. And as you come by the company, you'll see that there are some very small compact electric vehicles there and other things. The team is incredibly robust and creative. And yes, people are riding in the winter as well.
Well, they can just fly home, can't they?
I wasn't going to bring that up because of all the noise questions, but yes, it has happened.
Yeah. Well, back to Mark's point, which is there another configuration that your team can come up with? And if there's not, or if you've tried it and you've shown us, then we have more evidence. But I think coming up with that idea at the next stage of review, I think is important to play around with it and to show us whether it can or can't be done and what the impacts are, so we can make a determination. Does that seem fair?
No.
No.
it doesn't, the problem is Matt, we're faced with some, in order to keep beta here and keep beta operating, we're facing some, and again, I understand the comment was made, we're approving a project, not a company. I totally get that. But that is just only half of the logic equation. So we're trying to keep beta so that they can actually work here and grow and do what they need to do. And we're under some time constraints. So we're trying to move this as efficiently as possible. So we'll do it whatever we have to do, because you have to approve this, or we have to get it so it's approvable by you is a better way to say that. So if that's what you want, that's what we'll do. We would hope that we could come back as quickly as possible with some alternatives, and that you'd be able to review those, and we would have a better idea of whether or not they are doable alternatives, and we can put those in front of you.
Well, you wouldn't have to do that at sketch. You could do that at preliminary plat.
Don, you do not need to do this immediately.
Yeah.
This is us telling you what our thoughts are, and you're going to go back to preliminary plat.
Okay.
No.
I think the biggest concern is we go back to, so we're going to come back to preliminary plat with a bunch of alternatives, and then we're going to select an alternative, and then that'll bring us back to almost another preliminary plat hearing, and then a final plat after that. Is what I'm understanding the concern might be.
Marla and I talked about, once we were done with this, that we would combine preliminary and final, and and knowing that we might not be able to do it in one shot, but try to pull it all together for our next time in front of the board.
Right. So the disadvantage of coming back with something conceptual at preliminary plat is it has to be developed to a much greater level of detail. Saves some time and money to do, a quick sketch rather than do a preliminary plat. There's no appeal period for a sketch. The warning is shorter. You could continue it. You wouldn't even have to rewarn it.
The issue, Don, is that as what we do in sketch is we don't vote. So we're not going to make a vote. This isn't a public hearing. This isn't a binding decision made by, you're just getting the sense of the board on and I realize that's limiting, and I respect your frustration, but sketch isn't a time where we vote yes or no on your parking. We're trying to figure out how to make sure that we can, once it comes to preliminary plat and then final plat, or preliminary and final plat all at once, make sure that it's in compliance with LDRs, that we're doing our job, that it can't be challenged in court, and we're trying to get you to that point. So I understand there might take some more work here, but I don't think it's going to stop this project or delay the project anymore. Because you can't get a vote out of us tonight, regardless. We don't do that on sketch.
So I've got a question. This is Carolyn. I'm just trying to visualize. I'm not sure that how that's going to help, but flipping the parking spaces to the other side, because I'm still going to have the same amount of pavement, and we're going to lose spaces because of the entry, or else it's going to have to overlap the entry. But the configuration, unless we change the configuration, I'm not sure flipping is going to do anything.
So Carolyn, the pavement, the loophole, there's two things here, right? So the first one was the pavement, which we think we're okay with if we take it as the whole PUD. If that's the interpretation, when it comes to preliminary plat, that we're taking the PUD, not just this one project, but the airport as a whole, then that's the loophole for the pavement, or that's how you can get through. The parking issue is expanding the nonconformity of having parking in front of the building. That's part of the issue.
No, I understand that. If we're going to reconfigure this, and the idea is to flip the actual spaces from one side to the other, I don't see how that's going to alleviate the problem unless we go back to just a straight shot through the site like is already there. Because the drive aisle is going to stay the same size and the parking spaces are going to stay the same depth. So flipping them is just going to flip them unless I'm missing something. Chris, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think the answer is that at least what Marlo was saying was that a drive aisle is okay, but parking is not.
Oh,
Is my
okay.
understanding.
Okay.
But just because we're going to have to move forward with this, I'm wondering if our best tack is we've already gone through our own alternatives analysis and determined that, you know, maintaining existing parking was not the best use for this site. So we've already done our due diligence. We could potentially develop the plan the way it is to a preliminary plat level, which is pretty significant amount of design, but we'd be at the risk of you seeing our other alternative and saying, no, we want you to, you know, go back. But I think we've done enough work to determine that it's just not feasible or the way the project should be set up. So if we have that confidence, maybe it makes sense to just pull together a plan and present that to the board, showing you what it would imply to keep just maintain the existing parking as it is, which right now is not very functional.
Yeah, if you brought that to preliminary and final plat, that might be a good idea.
And then one other thing, back to Delisle Hall's comment, I thought it was a good one. What about would the board consider making that area a porous paver, which benefits me from a stormwater management, and is that something that the board would consider as an option? We're not promising to do it, but is it something we should consider to enhance this? Or is it a moot point and not make a difference?
Well, does it matter if we consider that the PUD as a whole regarding the impervious, or does it still, Marla?
It's the board is traditionally interpreted as the appearance of the surface. I think that there's some merit to permeable pavers or pervious pavement, and could be considered a trade-off, but would certainly not be a reduction in coverage, reduction in.
I'm sorry, the last part of that was, Marla, say that again, please.
So it has its own merits and it would be an improvement, but it wouldn't offset the front setback coverage and it wouldn't reduce the front parking because it's still, it's still parking.
And we don't have a big issue with the coverage anyway. So the real issue is that we have only certain ways that we can approve parking in the front. And we've got to make a decision whether we agree that this is the best choice versus something else.
Right, and that there are no other choices.
Here's the question. I'm not sure if, again, we're not here to design the project, but you know, if flipping it doesn't solve it, you know, Chris, you've gone through that exercise. You know, if you could make this a one-way, you know, circulation through, could the drive aisle be narrowed? And if you went, pardon me?
You can't do that.
So it doesn't. If you go by the South Burlington standards, if you narrow that drive aisle, or at least the guidance they give you, it's 24 feet for two-way and it's 22 feet for one-way. So it's really not significant enough to make any difference. I might have had my numbers a little bit off, but it's only a 2-foot difference that would be required. It wouldn't be saving much.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Don, I know nothing about parking, but if these spots were slanted, would it give you more room and allow you to keep the same number of spots?
You would typically lose spots when you slant them.
You do.
It also changes how your site would, you know, it changes your complete site circulation. So if you're thinking about coming in your entrance, you got some people coming in from Wilson Road, they're gonna pull in from that, and they're gonna see the entrance, and other people from the other way. And it
Thank
does
you.
change the entire site.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, have we exhausted parking? Should we go on landscaping and screening?
Sure.
Okay. Staff notes the board generally requires applicants to meet minimum interior parking lot landscaping on sites where parking is significantly altered from existing conditions. Depending on the results of the above discussion pertaining to parking, staff considers the applicant may be required to comply with minimum interior landscaping and shade tree requirements. Carolyn, have you?
Yep. So we haven't done a shade tree analysis, which we can certainly do, but we are using a variety of shade trees along the perimeter of the parking lots, and it's single-sided, so that should cover it, but we're happy to look at that.
Yeah, you'll just want to show that at the next stage of review. Fire protection, number 7, staff recommends the board ask the applicant to identify the location of the FTC to allow evaluation of the fire chief's comments.
It is at the northwest corner of the existing building, so right where the existing building meets the addition, where the plaza is, just inboard of that, just exactly there.
Okay. Great. And that'll be shown on the next stage of review. Signage, the applicant has shown a potential sign location on their plan. Staff notes the signage is reviewed under a separate ordinance and may not be included on the DRB plan. Staff further recommends the applicant and the airport meet with planning and zoning staff to review allowed signage, as there are tight restrictions on the number of signs allowed for a single property.
Noted.
Good, Don? Noted. Great. Okay. Any other questions from the board about this project, or any other questions from the applicant about the board's comments before I ask the public if they have anything to say? Okay, then I would open up for public comment. Anyone who wishes to comment on this project can do so by either sending us an email, writing in the chat box, or saying their name. Is there anyone that would like to public comment? Please say your name. Okay, hearing no one offering public comment, reviewing the chat box and seeing no one offering comment there. That's it. So I'd
we're
take
going
the
to
applicant.
continue for the purpose of taking public comment because of the meeting kerfuffle.
All right.
Is
okay,
it?
So
Can I ask
go
a
ahead.
question, Matt? Is
go
it
ahead,
possible? Is it possible for Chris or Carolyn to get us a quick sketch, since we're having to continue anyway? Doesn't stop you from heading on towards preliminary and final plat, but if you could get us a quick sketch, I think Marla needs it by Friday, but of what you think we talked about for parking, we could review that at the next meeting.
What I would say is, from our team perspective, that we would certainly make every effort to do that. I cannot speak on behalf of Chris and Carolyn, but it's frickin' Wednesday, but who cares? We aren't very far away from Friday, but yes, we could. I'm certain that we could figure out a way to have this back to you by Friday.
Well, let's do that. Then we get you on the agenda for May 19th.
Right? We appreciate that.
Right. So let's continue sketch. I make a motion. We continue sketch plan application SD 2015 of Don Stewart to amend a previously approved plan for an airport complex to continue this sketch plan application for May 19th. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Don Filbert. Take a roll call. Brian Sullivan,
Aye.
Don Philibert,
Aye.
Mark Bear,
Aye.
Melissa Portman,
Aye.
Jim Langdon,
Aye.
John Wilking,
Aye.
and Matt Coda votes aye. Okay, so we'll see you again on the 19th. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, last item on the agenda before our Zoom call goes out is minutes, not from the February 19th, 2019, only minutes from April 21st, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Does anyone have any revisions, or anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of the April 21st, 2020 meeting.
Second.
Okay, is it seconded by John? All in favor, voice vote, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Abstentions?
This is Jim is going to abstain. I wasn't at that meeting.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jim. Last item number 10, other business. Is there any other business from the board members or staff?
I would just like to ask that we exchange cell phone numbers, because tonight when we had to talk with each other, I don't think most of us had access. I mean, there were comments, but I would like to have cell phone numbers with names attached. And I wonder, Marla, if you could do that for us, please.
I have them, Don. I'd be happy to send that to you.
All right, great. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, great. And okay, so seeing no other business, thank you very much. This closes the Development Review Board meeting for May 5th, 2020. See you next time. Bye.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
This conference is no longer